This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mentioned it to you yesterday and then, as is my wont, I completely forgot to give you any further details. The possibility that honest Bob Jenrick might have actually played a media blinder has, well, it's rather come to pass, hasn't it, given the coverage that he receives today for, well, essentially accosting fare dodgers on London transport and encouraging them to pay or being filmed, most importantly, of course, remonstrating with them. Previously, I think he was best known for painting over the murals, wasn't he, in the processing centres for unaccompanied child asylum seekers. Absolutely extraordinary moment. But there were so many extraordinary moments during that cycle of politics that one perhaps didn't get, or maybe it did. Did it get the attention that it merited? Imagine that. Imagine sort of sitting up in bed one night and saying, I know what I'll do tomorrow. Those unaccompanied child asylum seekers, so arguably some of the most traumatised children in the world, I think their lives are a bit too easy because they've got some cartoons of Mickey Mouse on the wall in the otherwise incredibly utilitarian building where they are like machinery or cattle, where they are processed. That's the only word you can use. So let's paint over those cartoons. Let's paint over those murals. Let's paint over those warm images. That's what I will always think of when I think of Honest Bob. That, of course, and his presiding over the waste of nearly £100 million on a botched plan to house asylum seekers. But what is there a German word for it? When someone who is reprehensible in every way does something that you actually admire or approve of, is there a word for that? Is there a German word? Is it like the opposite of Schadenfreude? You sort of take... it's not pleasure. You take the opposite of pleasure in somebody else's opposite of misfortune. I don't know. There must be a German word for it. Don't send me made-up German words that actually smuggle in profanities that you hope I will accidentally read out on the radio, because I'm wise to your game. I will see through that like a window, like a freshly cleaned window. I don't know if you've seen it. I always, of course, forget that you may have better things to do with your life than watch videos of Robert Jenrick on your social media. I think he stuck this one on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I love the fact that Henry Riley got on the phone to Transport for London to make sure that he actually had the correct permissions to do the filming and the interactions that he did, and he didn't. We expect permission to be sought for filming of this nature. I hope they throw the book at him. And also, I don't know what kind of party he had with him, but it's highly unlikely he did it on his own with a selfie stick. You have to presume he felt fairly physically secure in... Stop it now. Yeah, the words are already coming in. I'm not going to read out any of them. And because you're so flipping funny, right, with your funny words, full of swear words that you think I'll accidentally read out on the radio, now I'm probably not going to see the one that's actually real. I'm going to miss it. Well, there is actually a German word for when the worst person you know does something that you actually approve of. But I'm not going to know if we've discovered it because you just stop sending me. I can't read them out. Some of them are very funny. But I'm not going to even give you the compliment of saying the names of the people that have made me laugh the most. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. I don't think he'd have been in any physical danger, which automatically distinguishes himself from you or me. If you find yourself on public transport, I suspect this is a mostly London thing, although I was done for fare dodging at Manchester Piccadilly Station. On the grounds that, this is going back to 1988, on the grounds that I had completely forgotten to buy a ticket at Romilly Station, where there were no barriers. And speaking of epic forgetfulness, we probably will get onto that story about undiagnosed ADHD a little later in the programme. That's a bit of a turn-up for the books. In fact, 2 examples of quite spooky goings-on the programme this week. Can you remember what the other one was? Or last week it was. You just heard in the news there that Nigel Farage is in America at a no doubt extremely lucrative cryptocurrency conference. Do you remember what I said when you asked me why he wasn't in the House of Commons for the debate about the Brexit reset? and why he instead chose to go to Nice and put his trotters up. I literally said to you, and it'll be on tape so I can prove it, I literally said to you, I suspect it will emerge that when Parliament is actually in recess, the time at which all the other MPs choose to go on holiday, he will have a very lucrative opportunity somewhere in the United States of America. And lo and behold, up he pops at a cryptocurrency conference in the United States of America, for which one has to imagine he will be paid handsomely. So never mind the people of Clacton, never mind a parliamentary examination of the reset of the Brexit he claims to care so passionately about, off to America to trouser a tasty cheque for punting cryptocurrency. It's almost like I can read the man like a book, isn't it? So that was pretty spooky. But then the really spooky thing was the fact that we have touched, I think for the first time ever on air, it's a conversation I've had a couple of times off air, on the issue of ADHD or ADD, attention deficit disorder without the hyperactivity, and wondered, I hope responsibly, whether perhaps it might be something that is relevant to me personally. I was slightly taken aback by the length of the queue of people contacting the programme to say, yes, it is, even with evidence and language I hadn't heard before. And someone said, that's your hyperfocus face. And I thought, what do you mean that's my hyper-focus face? I've got a caller on. If I've got a particularly engaging caller, or I'm moving into that zone where I won't let people get away with lies or nonsense. And apparently you can see it in my face. I start sort of picking my beard. I get hyper-focus. So we've been talking about it without any news angle at all. Just been sort of spinning a yarn, wondering out loud. And then lo and behold, the news today, as you may have heard with Nick, shows us that it's estimated that tons of people may have undiagnosed, 2.5 million in total, but only about a third diagnosed. So that's two quite strange things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. One, perhaps not that strange, an absolutely crystal clear prediction of what Nigel Farage will be doing instead of attending the House of Commons to represent his constituents and going to Nice to put his trotters up, and a curious, what would the word be, precursor, a curious precursor of the news story regarding ADHD. But I digress. 11 minutes after 10. Part of me wants to know why this appeals to us so much. Do you want to have a listen to it if you've missed it? So it is one of the worst people you know doing something that I think you will agree is pretty cool. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty necessary. No?
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want, but everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it.
Or at least most of the time.
Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello.
You're on camera, mate. You bang to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
What? Oh, he's doing so well. Weird Turkish barber shops. What? There was a lovely list there of things that get on everybody's nerves. Why would facial hair management get on anybody's nerves? I would sort of have, I hate that. There's people over there getting their beards trimmed. Oh, dear, down with that sort of. He was doing so well. Why does he have to bring also nationality? Anyway, Jenrick's going to Jenrick. So he's, I mean, this, you can tell from my voice, I really, oh dear, it's like pulling teeth. But he's nailed something here. He has spoken to an almost universal, it doesn't matter how much you hate him, it doesn't matter how much you remember the murals or the £100 million failed plan to house asylum seekers, it doesn't matter how awful you think Robert Jenrick is, in my view quite rightly, he's really drilled into something here, hasn't he? He's drilled into something very real. I've seen some research suggesting that the crime rate in his own constituency per capita is higher than the crime rate in London. But you know that the terminally online right will never forgive Sadiq Khan and his family for integrating so successfully into the country that his parents came to, that he ends up being elected mayor of the capital city 3 times in succession. I think this is absolutely kryptonite to people who pretend that their racism is somehow built upon a failure of other people to integrate. But what is it he's hit? What's the mother lode that he's hit here? I was trying to work it out. It's not confined to London. It happens everywhere. But in London, it seems to be a particularly pertinent problem, doesn't it? I want you to have a crack at that. What does it speak to? What has he tapped into? That's the word I wanted. What has he tapped into here? That list, apart from the one on the end.
Bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops.
It feels a bit like fast catamaran sailing, that last bit on the end, doesn't it? It's got a sort of curious ring to it. But what has he tapped into? 0345 6060 973. The numbers aren't huge. In London, I don't have figures for anywhere else, forgive me. Fare evasion is actually down slightly year on year, and the overall total is reckoned to be about 3.5%. So 3.5 in every 100 journeys will be fraudulent. In New York City, the figure is reckoned to be about 13%. So we are actually doing quite well, and yet most of us witness it. Most of us see it, and it taps into something that is quite hard to put into words. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do today. First job, put it into words. So, number one, what's he tapping into here? What is it? Because I feel it. I've got to be honest with you. Much as I disapprove of Robert Jenrick, I feel what he describes. You see someone tries to push through behind you on the barriers and you feel a sense of affront. They're not really taking anything from you. You can make an argument that fares have to go up to account for the people who aren't paying. But if it's 3.5 in every 100 journeys, you're not really going to notice, are you? And yet it speaks to something quite visceral, almost primal, when you witness somebody else doing it. The same with shoplifting. Marks and Spencer's can afford to lose a few sandwiches, so why does it wind us up so much? What is Robert Jenrick tapping into? 0345 6060 973. It's Friday and I'm off next week, so this is your last chance to get on the programme with me as opposed to the inimitable Lewis Goodall, who will be assuming the position from 10 o'clock on Monday for a while. And then the second bit, what's Jenrick up to? This is a politician who has the morals of an alley cat, the principles of a Punch and Judy performance. But what is he actually playing at here? What is he tapping into? Bike theft, phone theft, weird Turkish barbers. What is he tapping into? 0345 6060 973. And what is he personally up to? So I want to know what you feel as a consequence of this story. What am I feeling that I'm struggling to put into words? Why do we find these low-level, largely innocuous issues so enraging? More enraging than much bigger crimes, more enraging than white-collar crime. I get very worked up about PPE. Robert Jenrick apparently doesn't. Some of the contracts doled out to Tory cronies and their VIP mates were worth millions of pounds, including people who had no track record or history in the field, in the relevant fields. So, I mean, by all that is holy, you should be much, much angrier about the PPE scandals that have continued to emerge this week than you are about some fella hopping a fare at Waterloo Station. And yet it speaks to something very real, very primal. What is it that it taps into? 0345 6060 973. And what is he personally playing at? And that may bring the Turkish barbers angle into it. Look, there has been a proliferation of barbers shops up and down the country that many people consider to be disproportionate to the amount of grooming that is necessary. As with the candy stores that you see on Oxford Street, there are suggestions that it might involve some sort of money laundering. But you don't really get it with the candy stores because you can't stick the word Turkish in the phrase. You can't do the dog whistle. You can't actually try and make it about the ethnicity of the people responsible rather than the Haribo Lambo that they're knocking out on an industrial scale in a shop that nobody seems to go into on Oxford Street in London. So what is he playing at, and what is he tapping into? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 18 minutes after 10. I'm James O'Brien. This is LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Minutes after 10 is the time. Of course, as you've reminded me, there's a much better example of a much more egregious behaviour that you should be, by rights, a lot angrier about than somebody quite possibly who's got less money than you deciding not to pay for their travel on public transport, because Jenrick in 2020 accepted that his own behaviour had been unlawful when he sort of waved through a property development for the Conservative donor Richard Desmond. When he approved it, The Guardian reports today, Jenrick, who in 2020 accepted that his approval of the one-time Conservative supporting billionaire Richard Desmond's project was unlawful, said it was annoying watching people break the law and get away with it. So there's a second dimension to the question that I'm asking you. Why do the people that Robert Jenrick is appealing to here get angrier about someone skipping a £3 fare than they do about him essentially soft-soaping a billionaire and costing taxpayers a fortune in the process? 0345 6060973. Is it this simple from Andrew? I'm getting mugged and you aren't. I'm furious. The industry of making me furious is absolutely booming. Jamin is in Finchley. Jamin, what would you like to say?
Hi, thank you. Essentially, you asked, why is it so enraging?
Is it enraging that I should have asked first? Are you enraged?
Well, I think in some ways, yeah, maybe not at each individual instance of the crime, but kind of the idea of it, I would say. So, for example, these instances of fare dodging, it's not just the fare dodging, it's the fact that there is someone who doesn't care about their community at all, and easily fare dodges, easily maybe steals. And maybe this is the reason why we see this, especially in London and big cities, is because no one knows each other enough to care enough so that it would be a barrier to them doing these things.
I don't think it's going to be. I don't think that. I mean, the sense of community in London, there's some research out today showing that it's the highest in the country, or the pride that people take in being from London as opposed to being from a broader region like a country or something like that. But anyway, that's just a slight digression. It's not the heart of your point. Why would you get more annoyed about this than you would about epic white-collar crime or a government minister unlawfully waving through a property development for a billionaire donor to his Conservative Party? Because it doesn't feel like it's happening in our world. Is that what it is?
Well, there is some dimension of that, but I guess it's kind of the locality of it, but it's mainly that it's for example, those bigger instances of criminality or crime. I mean,
just bad behaviour. It's not necessarily it's unlawful, not criminal. There's a distinction to be drawn, but that's just me being pedantic.
No, it's fair point. But yeah, those kind of instances of bad behaviour, they're kind of personal or about personal interest or just about wanting to gain something for myself, so to speak. But these instances of kind of widespread, I don't know, like fare dodging, for example.
We need a word for it, don't we? Low-level something.
Yeah, low-level somethings. With these things, it's more like the root cause is that these people don't know their neighbour. And that is all the more.
I don't know where you're coming. I don't know where you're coming through on this.
Would it be okay if I could elaborate just very quickly? Because I do think it's very important. Ultimately,
well, yeah, all right. I'll give you 30 seconds, starting now.
Cool. So for someone that fare dodges, for example, and they have enough money to do so, what they're saying is, right, I'll just fare dodge. I don't care about the person next to me, my neighbour. I don't even know them.
So you're using neighbour figuratively. So yeah, all right. So there's a sort of collective expectation of good conduct, and those. Well, hang on a minute, because doesn't that mean the more that you resent being good, the more you're going to hate the people who are bad? I'm not that engaged in this. It speaks to something in me, and then I sort of say to myself, oh, calm down. But if you wish secretly that you were actually fare dodging, but you haven't got the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not quite guts, then you're going to get even more annoyed about it. You almost seem to resent the sense of community that binds us all together because it stops you from doing the things that in a feral universe you'd be free to do.
I'm saying it's bad that there that there are communities that are so disconnected that therefore it kind of makes it worse that there are kind of people.
All right, I may have misunderstood your point, or you may be completely right, but I don't. I just think it's people who look at how much it costs and think I don't have to pay that, so I won't. And it won't be driven by poverty in many cases. I'll tell you what I think has happened here. And given that I'm on a bit of a roll telling you that what has actually happened or what is about to happen in news stories, there's a Channel 5 show called Fare Dodgers at War with the Law. Here's another weird confession, but I love it. I think I love that kind of show. I did a voiceover for something years ago on Sky, and I thought it might open up a new little career avenue for me. I think it was called Aggro, and I did a voiceover on CCTV footage of people having fights in public. And what was quite interesting about it, I think I was living in Norwich at the time, and quite a lot of the footage featured Norwich. I thought I was going to carve out a little career niche, a little bit partridge flavoured, I grant you, but you take what you can get in this world. And I never got another call. I never got another commission. I never even got another tickle. I didn't audition. So I did one series for, I think it was Sky 1. Aggro, I'm pretty sure it was called. Long enough ago that it may not even survive on the internet. And I do this. I'd sort of go, it's Friday night in Norwich. And this character is coming out of a nightclub, somewhat worse for wear. I don't think I even wrote the script. I loved that job. It was money for old rope. I was obviously rubbish at it. But I love those shows. I love Fare Dodgers at War with the Law. And they posted some footage recently of quite a big collar. They caught a bloke who they reckoned had been dodging fares to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds because he was doing it every day. And he had, I mean, they do it on the show, so I can tell you, I don't want to give you ideas. But there's a thing you can do when you only get charged for the final bit of your journey. So you need to have something charged up, or you need to have bought something to get through the barrier at a station like Waterloo. But you can get on at a far out station where there are no barriers. And then there's a trick you can do, a sort of little hack you can do, which means you'll only be paying for the tiny, tiny last portion of that journey. And they'd followed him and they'd tracked him and they nailed him. I don't know why I find that so engaging. I think the answer to the question of why I find that so engaging is going to be the same as the answer to the question of what is it that Robert Jenrick is tapping into here. But I reckon someone else saw that clip. Either him or someone in his team saw that clip and came up with what is, by all accounts, a pretty brilliant idea to get out there and do it ourselves. You watch that clip and you find yourself rooting for the investigators. I'm a bit of an amateur detective, so I'm noticing things like the culprit's shoes. He was wearing black leather polished shoes, so he was obviously going to work in an office or possibly a retail environment, but he certainly wasn't going to work. He looked quite well turned out. His accent was quite middle class. I was just clocking all of these things. But someone, I reckon, in Jenrick's office watched exactly the same thing that I saw on social media and decided to go viral with it. And look, however much you don't like him or you remember the terrible things that he's done, it's worked. He's pulled something off here, and I'm trying to work out what it is. Patrick is in Croxley Green. Patrick, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Patrick.
Yeah, as much as, you might dislike the fella, he is tapping into the low-level stuff that we see every day that really annoys you. We don't know, as in we, like the people on the ground like me, don't really know, as you talked about yesterday, the Thames water, billions of pounds. But, when you see that, when you see people walking out of Greggs and Tesco's and fair jumping, it's the real in-your-face wrongness of it. I mean, Robert Jenrick has really been very prolific and very helpful with regards to, like, stolen tools for tradesmen's vehicles. And he's doing a hell of a job. He's going around car boot sales. He's going with camera crews, and he's really highlighting it.
He's a Channel 5 presenter, effectively, but translating it into politics.
Well, what he's actually doing is, for argument's sake, for like the tradespeople, he's really going for it and bringing it out because it's low level. It affects everyone's life daily. Yeah. And and fair play to him. I'll take my hat off to him. I never really liked him, mainly because I listen to you all the time. But notwithstanding that, I'd shake the man's hand now and go in.
This is the thing. This is the meme, isn't it? One of the worst people you know is doing something you agree with.
And the thing is, he's not only do we agree with, he's doing like the legwork.
It's very clever politicking. I mean, is this the weird answer? You mentioned the show we did earlier in the week about Thames Water. Did an hour yesterday on whether there was any way back to relevance for the Tory party. Is having a leader who's turned himself into a Channel 5 documentary presenter, but for clips, not for actual television programmes, a way that the Tories somehow appeal to the constituency they need to stay afloat.
It could be.
Oh, my days.
It could be that he's just actually just a decent chap at the bottom. Maybe he's realised he's been awful.
Murals, mate.
Sorry?
Murals. Unaccompanied child asylum seekers in a horrible concrete building that has a couple of cartoons on the wall, and he gives the order to paint over them.
But he's actually doing something right now.
Patrick. Listen, I can hold two thoughts in my head at the same time, but he might actually be a really decent bloke, is not one of them. This is an opportunity for him to garner public attention in a way that he's not going to point out is almost certainly a consequence of 14 years of Tory cuts to all of the services that used to protect us from precisely the sort of low-level misbehaviour that he's now highlighting for clicks and giggles. Give your head a wobble.
Sorry about that. Well, I still agree with him on what he's doing for us tradespeople. That's what I agree with.
No one else has spoken up for you. I mean, I remember when I got burgled and the police suggested I go to a car boot sale to see if I could find my kit and caboodle. And there's a little naive part of me thought, it's no way you could do that, lads. What am I going to do?
Well, Robert Jenrick's doing it, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
No, you absolutely are right to. Has he secured any stolen tools, do we know?
He has been out there. He's getting car boot sales closed down where the tools are being stolen. He's rocking up there in people's faces.
This is it. You can't argue with that, however much you might not like him or however important you might think it is that he likes nothing better in life than to make life even worse for traumatised children fleeing war without their parents. Yes, who deserves to be given a bit of a kicking today? Traumatised children fleeing war without their parents. But there you go. I mean, he's got Patrick on side, and you can see why. So there's your answer to the question of what he's playing at. Do you have to be a bit of a mug to fall for it? No offence to Patrick, but do you have to be a bit of a mug not to see through this and ignore the 14 years of austerity and cuts that has almost certainly added to the low-level misbehaviour that he's targeting? I don't know. You tell me. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:35. This from a pal of mine, Nick Revel, who co-writes the Jonathan Pye series on BBC Radio. It's rather elegant, really. Just as the fare dodgers follow us through the barrier to their advantage, so Jenrick follows them through, in turn, to his. How many people genuinely think Robert Jenrick lies awake in bed at night worrying about fare dodgers when he is responsible for unlawfully waving through an epic property project for a billionaire Tory donor, unlawfully being the key point. But that doesn't mean it's bad politics. Just because you can see through it, I don't want to pick on Patrick in Liverpool, the last caller, but just because you think you can see through it doesn't necessarily give you the right to have a swing at everybody else. This is from Kieran. This made me laugh out loud during the break. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I think you'll be able to work out which bit of it was that tickled me pink. James, regardless of what Jenrick is trying to do, if the Tory party think their saviour is yet another chubby-faced public schoolboy, brackets, no offence intended, close brackets, with right-wing tendencies, will they never learn? Says Kieran, who describes himself as an ex-Tory voter. Listen, you're doing it again. I have to defend Robert Jenrick now. He's been on the Ozempic, hasn't he? So he's no longer a chubby-faced former public schoolboy, but brackets, no offence intended, I still am. That's terrible. Talk about driving it home. 10:36 is the time. What is he up to? And why does it work? Why does it work? What's it tapping into? Someone who is not what you would call a paragon of virtue or even vaguely admirable has tapped into something here. And Patrick's right. I didn't know about the tools. I've double-checked. He's doing that as well. So he's trying to cast himself as someone who cares about precisely the sort of taxpayers who were left hideously out of pocket when he unlawfully waved through Richard Desmond's property project. It's fraudulent, but I mean, look at the politicians that are doing well in the world at the moment. Look at who's living in the White House. Look at who's leading in the polls in this country. These are politicians who have turned being dishonest into an absolute art form, dishonest and self-interested. So he's looked at that and thought to himself, I'll have a bit of that. £45 million is the tax bill that the Tory donor was able to avoid after Robert Jenrick unlawfully rushed through approval for a housing development. £45 million. And yet somehow £3 worth of train fare lands differently. And I don't know why. Luke's in Stoke-on-Trent. Luke, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Oh, okay, right. First of all, I'd like to put a name to what you're describing, which is low-level petty crime and misdemeanours.
I think yeah, okay, go on.
Yeah. So, basically, I think to answer what you've just asked about what Robert Jenrick's up to, I think he's acting a bit like a perverse Batman. And what he's doing is that he tried to get away with his own scam and then says, oh, well, I couldn't get away with it, so all these people getting away with £3 here and there and everywhere else, if we could round all them up, it would equal to what I was trying to get away with, so why aren't they getting away with it?
Maybe I'm running with perverse Batman, by the way. Who then, in this analogy, who becomes perverse Robin?
I don't know. Probably Boris Johnson's a good suggestion for Paul.
So I don't know that it's not that. He's not looking at the actual misdemeanours. He's tapping into something that Patrick described quite perfectly, and it's something that lands differently from... Listen, this is what Richard Desmond sent him in a message to say thank you when he unlawfully shaved him £45 million in tax. We appreciate the speed as we don't want to give Marxists loads of dough for nothing. That's a man who made most of his early fortune from pornography. So, the idea that Jenrick is some sort of moral arbiter is absolutely absurd, but this is going to work.
But now we're coming on to the topic of what it is that actually drives us balmy with this.
Yes, go on.
And the thing is it's about the fact that all of these sort of low-level crimes are enforced and sociably enforced, so that basically everyone knows what the rules of going into certain circumstances are, and that by waiving those rules, although we have ticket attendants and conductors and all of that, it's incumbent on society to enforce that and witness it and call it out when they see it. And it's because one of your contributors was trying to call the use the word community. What he was trying to say, I think, and it is accurate, is that you could rely on shouting out in a crowd, thief, and somewhat everyone then turning and engaging with trying to halt the crime.
Yeah.
In the alienation that we face, not just in London but across the nation, is that we don't feel we can trust other people around us.
Maybe this is the point Jamin was making about
Yes.
neighbours and community, and that
Yes.
something it's proof of something that's broken in the sense of community,
being eroded.
collective. I mean, people have always fair dodged, though, and the numbers are coming down. But it doesn't matter if the perception is that people are swinging the lead and getting away with it in ways that they didn't. Chris points out. Hang on a minute. Chris points out Michael Gove is going to be Robin all day long. He's got the look. Hasn't he? Perverse Robin, Michael Gove, perverse Batman, Bob Jenrick, honest Bob Jenrick. I love this.
So the question of, and then you'll know this from statistics, people saying that the fare dodging is going down, is that because it's not being reported as much?
It's an extrapolation from what they catch into what that would mean. What they catch from what they check, and then they calculate from what would happen if they checked everybody. That's how you end up at the figure that they end up. He got done for speeding as well, didn't he, honest Bob?
Probably. I don't know that one.
Probably. Perverse Batman.
In the Batman bail.
He got done for speeding. Fined more than £1,600. He was doing... it was 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, driving at 68 in a 40 zone in Northamptonshire. I think it was it during lockdown?
If he was in the Batmobile, I'd give him a wave of pass.
Perverse Batmobile. An awful lot of people are pointing out a name that you could apply to Robert Jenrick that rhymes with Batman, but which I most certainly cannot say out loud on the radio. I'll leave you to speculate on what that name may be, but I think Roddy got there first. Luke, thank you. It's weird. I mean, it's weird and not weird at the same time. This notion that this really rankles. So here's a bloke, right? He was driving way, way, way over the speed limit. That can cause death. There's a reason why we clamp down on speeders quite hard, because of the consequences of what speeding can do. And this is him, but now he's claiming to be a sort of champion. God, he has lost a lot of weight, hasn't he? And now he's claiming to be a champion of the non-law breaker, the champion of the law-abiding citizen. It's just really weird, but I think it might work. Michael is in Bromley. Michael, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
saw Crystal Palace win the FA Cup 2 weeks ago, and now I'm talking to you. So life feels like it's on the up.
Doesn't
James.
get much better than that, mate, does it, eh?
I think not. No, definitely not. Mine is about, I've spent the last 30 years working in marketing, and I actually think it's quite interesting what Jenrick is doing, because it's sort of tapping into
definitely
sort of a slightly old-fashioned but powerful marketing piece around heuristics. So I think what he's doing is he is making it very believable that this crime is happening, and he's using a crime that I would see because I travel on the tube, or I would read about on Facebook, because on my local Facebook page there's always warnings that my van's been broken into.
Yep.
So I think what he's done is he's kind of reduced that gap between I would never meet a Westminster Minister of State, but actually, and so what he talks about in that day-to-day life is I understand, but probably doesn't hit my day-to-day life in the way that I travel on the tube every day to get to work, and I see people jump over the barriers. So I think he's just used a very clever marketing heuristic. 1 in 3 people in your street have switched to X. Why don't you? He's used that very clever thing to, I think, appeal to people on a level that they can understand, and a level that is part of their, even if it's not part of their day-to-day life, it's so close to it that they can imagine that it is part of their day-to-day life.
Heuristic is one of those words that I keep meaning to look up, so thank you for that. I haven't got the confidence to use it in conversation like you just did, so I did actually look it up. Enabling someone to discover or learn something for themselves would be the adjective, so the noun then just becomes a heuristic process, so something that allows people to discover or learn something for themselves. In this case, a sense of grievance, a sense of anger at the behaviour of other people.
Correct, and it's a tool that now you've started reading it, James. You might get slightly fascinated by it because you'll start to see how commonly it's used as a way of sort of convincing people and appealing to people. And as you've said, it's doing something that
it speaks to something more accessible than the misbehaviour of. £45 million is not something that we're ever going to feel we've been cheated out of. But if we're paying for our train ticket and someone else isn't, that gets personal.
Correct. We used to I used to work for a company that used prize draws a lot to sell its products. But what we found was nobody has ever met anyone that's won the first prize in a big prize draw for millions of pounds. So what you do with a prize draw is you have a big prize, but then you have 10,000 prizes of 10 quid, because everybody knows someone that's won a tenner in a raffle or something like that. So it's that breaking it down so that it feels like it could be me.
It's clever. It's clever politics. It's very clever politics.
It's good. Do you know, him aside, I'm not commenting on him, but it's one of those times when you see somebody has used marketing, what drives people's behaviours, and used it well and tapped into it.
Oh, it's what Channel 5 do so brilliantly, and I'm sure other television stations do as well, but Channel 5 is the one that I turn to watch fair dodgers at war with the law, and someone in his office, possibly him or in his circle, has noticed what happens to your feelings when you watch this programme and thought, I'll have a bit of that.
Correct.
Because he now gets associated with the feeling of retaliation or the feeling of pushback against it.
And I think credible, because he's tapping into those problems that I see on my very local street rather than on that sort of global scale, which is more difficult for me to understand, because my life is I walk to the shop half a mile away to get my food, and I get on the train station 200 yards away. It just brings that locality in, which I think is really powerful. It's my community.
I'm quite a happy commuter, so I'm less susceptible to it. Because obviously I'm coming to work to do this for a living, which frankly is ridiculous. But if I was schlepping my way back to the days when I was working in retail or killing myself on a newspaper, I'd be more resentful of the person that I noticed fair dodging, because it would feel like my contract with society was, sometimes more take than give. And this fella over here is doing it all. He's helping himself to the.
Yeah, and imagine how sensitive you are to that when you've had a bad day at work.
Exactly
as well.
What I mean.
And everybody's out to get you, and you poor old me. And then there's some blokes just jumped over the barrier.
Yes, thank you. The cheeky so-and-so. So there is your word for the day, heuristic. That's a great contribution from Michael. And no one can really listen. I know I'm getting quite a few messages saying I'm really clever and I think I'm being unfair. But I know you can see through it. I know that Jenrick does not really care about anything or anyone except Jenrick. But that doesn't matter. Nor does Farage. And he's leading in the polls at the moment. He'll pose with a beer pot, won't he? He'll pose with a pint pot. And then when the cameras aren't there, reach for the glass of red that he's kept just out of shot for a moment. So it doesn't matter. Most days we're in the business of what should happen or the world we want to live in. Some days we're in the business of the world we do live in, the world that we have to acknowledge. It doesn't matter how many of us are clever enough to see through the mural painter and recognise that this is nonsense. It will work, and it associates him with a sense of pushing back. It doesn't matter that it's pushing back against the consequences of 14 years of austerity. The lesson given to society by Boris Johnson's premiership that corruption is great, moral depravity is to be encouraged, that rules don't apply. I mean, what message do you take away from Boris Johnson's approach to lockdown? The fact that Downing Street became the single most sinful address in the entire country when it came to breaches of the laws that they blooming made. All of this is relevant. But I don't think it's going to touch Jenrick on this occasion. It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I've got a contender for a conversation later in the show. I don't think it's ever worked before. You know how contrary I am sometimes. I've done it, and we've had like half-decent conversations about it. I mean, from your end of the microphone, it may have been brilliant radio. But sometimes I don't have a long queue of people with really interesting things to say. I suppose that's when I earn my money. That's, when it's my job to make everything interesting. But I don't think that when you do conversations about Englishness or pride in your origins, I mean, people just start talking about warm beer and cricket. And it's really, really hard to pin down anything substantive or nuanced or meaningful. But there is some interesting research out about the loyalty people feel to their locale, whether it is a local locale or a broader locale like a nation. So do you feel more loyal to Newcastle or to the northeast, to London or to England, to Birmingham or to England or the West Midlands? And it's really interesting, but I'm not yet sure that it lends itself to a humdinger of a chat for us to have together because of that danger of everything just falling into the warm beer and cricket trope. I could be wrong. Well, only one way to find out. Stay tuned. 10:52 is the time. Jamie speaks for quite a few of you, and he says he's very surprised by people getting so exercised by something as irrelevant as fare dodging, particularly, I'd remind you, when the numbers are a fraction of what they are in, for example, New York City. But I mean, that's fine. And you can point out that we've had criminal governments, never mind criminal fare dodgers, and that the PPE contracts are a much more egregious abuse of the general public than fare dodging. But it does speak to something. It does speak to something. 10:53. On we go. Rob's in Durham. What's going on here, Rob?
Well, to be honest, I'm still chuckling at the guy who said no offence intended, if I'm being honest. But I think it's at a far lower level. It's tapping into the English hatred of queuing. Ultimately, we hate nothing more than somebody pushing in the queue in the supermarket.
Yeah.
We'd like to make it a criminal offence, people having 6 items instead of 5 items in the bag. It's one step up from that to the English. Somebody's getting one over on you, and Jenrick is tapping into the trope of that guy wants your cookie. And ultimately, it's a very low level crime. I was fortunate enough to be in New York.
But that guy wants your cookie trope is fraudulent. I don't think that does work here, because I get, for people who don't know, it's a famous cartoon that I sort of passed off as my own for a while, whereby somebody like Rupert Murdoch is sitting at a table with an ordinary working class bloke and someone who came here from a foreign country, and he trousers almost all the biscuits himself, and then whispers in the ear of the ordinary working class bloke, that immigrant's trying to nick your biscuits. But this is not fraudulent. We do genuinely feel aggrieved when we see someone pushing in front of us in the queue, or indeed hopping over the barrier at a train station.
But it is, with no offence intended,
yeah.
Ultimately, it is exactly the same, because the guy is getting one over on the English person,
yeah,
who fair-mindedly would never dream of doing that.
Yeah, I'm being pedantic. I'm just pointing out that the message is the same, but in one case, the message is... if you bring Englishness into it, it gets trickier, doesn't it? Because why on earth did he mention weird Turkish barbershops? And and Sadiq Khan, who is, of course, one of the most popular targets for the online far right, or this constituency of crazy, terminally online people that Jenrick and Badenoch seem to be obsessed with, and therefore it becomes a little bit dog whistly. Only an issue now that Sadiq Khan is mayor, says Chris. Not an issue when, for example, Boris Johnson was.
And the other thing you forgot about Jenrick was during COVID he was driving around the country between his various homes and got away with that as well. Just to add to the litany.
Breaking the lockdown rules.
Yeah,
that rings a bell. I haven't got that in front of me, so I'll double check and clarify. I've got no reason to doubt you, but that does that. I know he got caught speeding. I've established that, but he visited his parents. He visited his parents despite repeatedly urging the public to stay at home except for essential journeys. I mean, you're right. The rules, well, it's rules for thee, but not for me, isn't it? That's the way it goes. At 10:56 is the time. Louise is in Brentwood. Louise, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi there. I think it's more a case of just having a good moral code. And I think the more that things have broken down, letting criminals out to basically do what they want, and there's no police to look and supervise, it just feels like, how's it going to look like in 10 years' time?
This is a Tory. The Tories are entirely responsible for the jails being full and the police being cut. So he's got some front standing up and saying, I'm here to fix it all.
Yeah, but it's not about his moral code, it's about my own. We should all have our own moral code. So yes, he's highlighting it, but he's also highlighting the fact that there's no one supervising this stuff. This isn't being taught in school, and it's not being passed down from your parents, because if I didn't have the money for a fare, I wouldn't go out. I don't just, jump over the ticket, but that's not how I was brought up.
No, but only 3.5% of passengers were, and we'd all like to see zero, but 3.5% doesn't exactly speak to a nationwide malaise. So that, what you feel is real, but whether it's actually based upon fact as opposed to anecdote is less clear.
But I think it's not highlighting just that, is it? It's the fact that somebody feels justified to come onto your property and take your things and burgle you. It's a general decency you just don't take from other people. It's a general moral code that you just don't do that.
This bloke took £45 million from the taxpayers of Tower Hamlets and gave it to a billionaire.
But that's his moral code. So what I'm saying is he's highlighting these things. But
so he's appealing to your moral code, despite the fact he hasn't got much of one himself.
Yes.
I think you've nailed it. By God, Louise, I think you've got it. By Jove, I think you've. So that makes it both effective politics and a little bit sort of dodge.
Well, it's hypocritical and
dodgy.
It's arrogant.
Yes.
It's arrogance at the end of the day. I can behave how I like, just like these people who are jumping over the turnstiles.
You've got it. Yeah. So he's actually got more in common with the fare dodgers than he has with you and me. Because of what he did during lockdown. I bet you wouldn't drive at 30 miles over the speed limit. You wouldn't give special treatment to billionaires.
How good we are.
Yeah, and you wouldn't paint over murals in a processing centre for unaccompanied child asylum seekers. But
we've got better things to do with our lives, I suppose. He hasn't.
I'm glad you weren't the first caller. I think you've knocked it out of the park. Thank you, Louise. 10:58 is the time. I'll squeeze in one more. Terry's in Camden. Terry, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Terry.
Robert Jenrick doesn't appeal to me one little bit, but what he's done here, I think he's tapped into making everyone a grass. Because I've seen people go through the barrier before, and if 10 people see that person go through the barrier, 10 people don't march up to him and say, "Oi, mate, come back here with us. We're going to stop you." Nobody stops anybody because they've all got their lives to live. But Robert Jenrick has tapped into that little cluster of people that are going to go, "Oh, that's out of order." I see people going in Greggs many a times and just pick up a sandwich and walk out with it. Am I going to stop them? No, because I've got my sandwich in my hand. I'm standing in the queue. And I honestly
This is fascinating. This is psychologically fascinating. So it doesn't bother you at all?
Well, it doesn't bother me because I've got other things going on that are more important than that guy going through the barrier.
But we can hold several thoughts in our head at the same time, and we do.
It soon leaves my head.
Say again?
Okay. It soon leaves my head. I've seen the guy go through. I might tell my partner when I get home, I see this guy jumping through the Bakerloo barrier, blah, blah, and he ran off and nobody chased him. Well, so what? Okay, carry on. The rest of the day continues, you know. So
that's almost the phone. So what? Well, that is what this phoning has been, and you're just not feeling what all the other callers are describing. The language of supergrass or grassing is interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, if no one ever told on people doing wrong, no one doing wrong would ever get caught.
Well, no, but at the same time, at a high level, Robert Jenrick has done that, what you just mentioned, about 45 million taken away from the taxpayer. Yes, he's being called out, but he's got the front, like the bloke going through the barrier, to front it out. So he's got away with it. So the barrier jumper is the same as Robert Jenrick, fronting it out and going about his business.
I love this. Unfortunately, this is but a small corner of the UK media, Terry, but the idea that you and Louise have just introduced to the programme towards in the closing minutes, that Robert Jenrick is actually... He's got more in common with the fare dodgers than he has with the rest of us, but he's successfully persuading enough people that he's on their side against the fare dodgers, when in fact they're just different examples of the same attitude, the same arrogant, entitled attitude to the society that we share. God, that's brilliant. I can't remember that. I know, well, you're very well. To be fair, Louise did the heavy lifting, Terry. You've come in and you're a bit like Terry. You're a bit like John Terry. Terry, you've come in your full kit at the end just to pick up the cup, haven't you?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I bet you are. But I love it when that happens. So I couldn't pin down what it was that made me uneasy about this story, because I quite like the central thrust of the filming and the targeting of both fare dodgers and people flogging stolen tools at car boot sales, and the knowledge of what passes for Robert Jenrick's integrity made it feel a bit off. But it's more than that. It's the fact that him, in terms of his arrogance, his sense of entitlement, his law-breaking, his unlawful conduct, he's got a lot more in common with the fare dodgers than he has with you and me. But here he is, trying to cast himself as the upholder of law and order. Yeah, well, like I say, sometimes it's a shame that, it's not insignificant in the great scheme of things, but the fact that most people aren't going to reach this conclusion unaided is a pity, isn't it? Because it means he'll get away with the grift, or whatever you prefer to call it. It's 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11, and I think we'll dive straight into a story that is simultaneously fascinating and just in a way a little bit spooky. I don't know how much attention you pay to the programme throughout the week. And you get counted just for tuning in once. So when we talk about having, 1.4 million listeners, some of them will have been listening to all 15 hours religiously, and some of them might have just tuned in for half an hour. But I don't know whether or not I need to remind you of what we've been saying this week about ADHD. I can't even remember why it came up in the first place, but I wondered out loud, responsibly, because it's something that has been suggested to me before, both on air and off air, that there may be some traits of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that I display. And given there probably isn't anyone else in your life that you listen to for 3 hours every day, is there? So I always feel that you know me quite well sometimes, possibly better than people that you would more ordinarily expect to understand me. You know, people that I spend a lot of time with off air. I spend 3 hours every day with you, sometimes bearing my soul, exposing some, not all, of my innermost feelings and thoughts and secrets, explaining how I end up in the places that I end up in. So 3 hours a day. And of course, I display behaviours which have nothing to do with the news or the topics that are under discussion. And one of the examples people have cited in support of this idea that I've got, producers just pointed out, after all the years we've worked together, you've got a really weird job, haven't you? Yes. Yes, I have, actually, but it's also rather wonderful. Weird and wonderful, I think, is the thing. But it's quite weird from the other end of the microphone as well. This complete stranger who you're never going to meet, but you feel that you know him because he spends 3 hours a day in your sitting room or your kitchen or whatever, or your car, of course, whatever it may be. So some of the things that people have, and Bruce is right, I do use my show as therapy sometimes, but therapy for you as well, mate, not just for me. So the way I forget about stuff, the hook and tease would be a great example. I have quite a lot of neurodiverse people who are among my regular correspondents, and they recognise stuff that I don't recognise as being neurodiverse. So it is frankly ridiculous that after 20 years of doing this job, I can say something to you at 10 past 11 with the full intention of reminding you of it at 20 past, and I'll just completely forget. The number of times I'll be on the tube home, not having fare dodged, I stress, and I open up my Blue Sky account these days to see that you still don't know what the answer is to the question that I asked you at 10:30 and promised to reveal just after the 10:30 news. The hook and teeth. I'll give you an example. All right, ready for this? This is today's missing word round. Here's a question. Will I actually remember to give you the missing word? And you I mean, this isn't performative. It's not very professional. I don't know why my colleagues haven't stepped up to the plate, I'm not going to lie, and filled in these holes over the years that we've all been working together, but they haven't. Welsh farmer in financial stress pleads guilty to theft of 70 blank. Welsh farmer in financial stress pleads guilty to theft of 70 blank. So now I cannot say to you in full confidence that I will reveal the answer later in the programme. I certainly intend to, and I mean to, but I often don't do. And that is one of the things that you've suggested points to a certain deficit disorder, perhaps. And then there are other things as well. I hadn't heard the phrase hyperfocus. My hyperfocus face. I don't want to make this too personal, but I'm going to put myself out there before I ask you to do the same. That's sometimes how these transactions work, these emotional, conversational transactions work like that. I wonder whether there's something about this job that lends itself to deficit disorder, because you can do the hyperfocus. I've often said it's a bit like flying an aeroplane. I've never flown an aeroplane. Jones, the engineer, who studio produces Nick's show now, but of course he used to work with me as well for many years before Keith overthrew him. He can fly planes now. He's a qualified pilot. So I should check with him. Is it like being at work? Is it hyper-focus? So you get really distracted when you're doing something like reading a book or watching a film, more so than ever, as we talked about at the end of last week. But the zone that you have to be in when you're in the studio, you can't really faff about, can you? Maybe on a music station you can, but on a speech station, I mean on Classic FM, you go for about 40 minutes without having to say a word. You could run a minicab office from the Classic FM studio and no one listening to the station would notice. Come in number 44, come in number 4, pick up from Old Kent Road, pick up from Old Kent. Oh, and here's some lovely Rachmaninoff. Old Kent Road, pick up. But you couldn't do it in this job. You've got to be, it may not always seem that way to you, but you've got to be here. You've got to be absolutely focused on what is going on. And sometimes I've got to do several things at once. But in my real life, when I'm off air, I'm an absolute menace. I'm better than I was, but I lose stuff, keys. I haven't seen my sunglasses for about 3 months. Goodness knows where they are. Found my kids. Sometimes I wake up at night and I go, oh, they'll be in those trousers that I wore to that thing. And they are. Anyway, I digress. And I don't want this to be about me. I may add a little question later about what difference a diagnosis might make to my life, but the question I'm going to ask you now is what difference it makes to yours. More than 800,000 people in England alone have been formally diagnosed with ADHD. That's 1 in 44 children who have the condition on their medical records. Emma points out that the amount of times I say, but I digress, is also evidence, perhaps, of a deficit disorder. And that makes sense, doesn't it? That makes sense. But I'm not alone if I am in this on this spectrum. 1 in 44 children are. 1 in 125 adults. That's because schools and are now much better placed to spot it. So the older you are, the less likely it is that it got spotted when you were young. Workplaces and schools will, of course, have to adapt to accommodate the rising number of... Well, is it a rising number of people with ADHD, or is it just a rising number of diagnoses of ADHD? Older people, some younger people, but mostly older people still struggle with the science here. I used to be one of them. It shames me, actually. Actually, no, shame is too weak a word. It pains me. It pains me to remember that I was one of those people who talked about, we used to just call it naughty in my day. Because dyslexia would be another example, wouldn't it? Dyslexia would be something else that was just dismissed when we were kids. Even when I was a kid, but if you're older than me, certainly when you were a kid, as just being Brian Conley talked to me about this on a recent Full Disclosure. Lovely, really lovely man. One of those interviews that goes to places you're just not expecting it to go to. He has spent his whole life essentially trying to disprove the teachers who told him he was stupid when he was a little boy. I get quite emotional thinking about that. And the reason why they told him he was stupid, and they just did, in a way that they probably wouldn't now. You're stupid. You are thick. This is the limit of your aspirations. These are the kind of jobs you should be applying for. Because his dyslexia was chronic. It still is. It takes him a heck of a lot longer to learn his lines for a West End show or when he was in EastEnders than it would most of the other cast members. But he has spent his whole life trying to prove those teachers wrong, the teachers who called him thick. And that is what we used to do with dyslexic children. So I was guilty of hearing these acronyms that I hadn't come across before, hearing about ADHD or ADD or whatever it may be, and thinking, oh yeah, whatever. We called them naughty in my day, or I was called lazy at school. And do you know why I was called lazy at school? Because I was lazy, not because I had some sort of deficit disorder or I found it harder to concentrate than other kids did. A mate of mine told me the other day, his son, who's 14, comes home from school, does his homework straight away. And we sat there, he's an old flatmate of mine, so we know each other pretty well. And we both sat there going, what the heck happened there? What do you mean he comes home and does his homework straight away? And you suddenly realise, most kids do. The one, if you look, think of a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, have you got it? Now, sitting down to do my homework, in terms of effort and expense of energy, for me, that's 10. When I'm writing a book, I speak to some writers and they love it. I say, 3 hours a day. I write 2,000 words before breakfast every morning. And I'm like, you are weird. So just a child doing their homework, okay? Having to muster the powers of concentration that you need to just do your homework at the age of, say, 14. Now, for me, if you were to put a score on how hard that is, for me, 8 or 9. And for my mate as well, because we used to share a flat together. We know exactly what we like. Could play video games for hours on end. Indeed, we did. Used to have a Sega Dreamcast, would you remember? And then his son, 14 years old, comes in, does his homework. And for him, it's about a 2. So how can that be fair? How can you be treating the kid for whom sitting down and doing your homework involves an effort of 8 out of 10 points in exactly the same way, in class and out of class, as the kid for whom it involves 1 or 2. So that's just me thinking out loud, because I don't know the detail. I don't know the diagnostic thresholds. I don't know the difference, really, between being a bit lazy and actually having a condition. I don't know how it works, and I'd like to know more about it, if that's all right with you. I'd like you to tell me what the difference is, for example, between having ADHD or ADD and having some behaviours that don't deserve that description, that look the same. So a little bit lazy, finds it hard to... Maybe we're all on this spectrum in some way. Some people are at the bottom of it and barely merit the description. Some people are near the top of it. But the thing I really want to know... So we'll start with that, actually. I really want to know that as well. What is it? 0345 6060973. Can you put it into words? What it is? And the other thing I really want to know is, what difference does a diagnosis make? I guess if it involves medication, the answer is going to be quite obvious, but I'd still like to hear it. But what difference does a diagnosis make? You're still you. You're still dealing with all the things that you have to deal with. What difference does it make when it's given a name? People have told me over the years that the difference is absolutely huge. But I don't know why. What difference would it make? If, for example, I did have it, I was on this spectrum, what difference would a diagnosis make? And that is a question that must have lots of answers. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother doing the diagnoses. And the older you are, the number of lads I've heard from, and it does seem to be more common among men than women, the number of lads I've heard from over the years who only realised they had it when their boy got diagnosed. So the school have spotted that the lad has got behavioural issues or discipline issues, but they don't think he's a wrong-un. There's no such thing as a wrong-un, is there? At that age. Maybe at any age. Nobody's born bad. But if they're telling you you're thick or they're telling you you're naughty, then the chances are you're going to end up naughtier than you would have done if they didn't. So the social importance of these diagnoses is immeasurable. Something else I think Wes Streeting has got wrong, because he's focused on the sceptics. He's talked about overdiagnosis and too many people being written off. Well, you can have overdiagnosis without writing people off. You'd rather have overdiagnosis than underdiagnosis. If you looked at the criminal community in this country, if you looked at the population of a prison and did full diagnostic tests on them, I reckon it would be off the bloody charts. I really do. Because it's the path you'd go down, isn't it? If you've managed to disengage from education, if you've got discipline, all of these things. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to tell me. What does diagnosis change? 0345 6060973. And crucially, what is it exactly that you are describing when you describe your ADHD? 0345 6060973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 11 is the time. About 2.5 million is the figure. That's the number of people estimated to have ADHD. Only a third are diagnosed. The NHS struggles with this. I think the most important element of the conversation for everybody, as opposed to people who simply have it or think they might have it, is the cost to society of not diagnosing it. The way in which that if people are not helped to manage the differences that are delivered by ADHD and ADD, then they are likely to cost society either materially or immaterially, either materially or in other ways. So I want to nail down exactly what it is, and I want to know what difference a diagnosis makes. This is lovely from Kirsty. The difference, James, is that I understand myself better. I have resisted the labelling previously, but it's put things into perspective and helped me understand why I have always felt like a piece of my jigsaw doesn't quite fit. It has helped me be more comfortable in my skin and to embrace. Yes, I'm still the same, but I'm not embarrassed, ashamed, or constantly apologising for being me. That's the kind of testimony that makes me think if I am on this particular spectrum, I'm very near the bottom of it. I love your show, writes Rob, and I listen every day. I'm a paramedic and I have a late diagnosis of autism and ADHD. The benefits to me are about reframing my life and decisions I've made, about learning why so many things did not go as I'd thought they would. More importantly, it helps me plan my daily task. It's the difference between holding 10 thoughts in your head and starting all of them, and not finishing any of them, or finishing them, quotes, eventually. It was a light bulb motion, a light bulb moment in my life. And this from Kai. I was diagnosed 6 months ago, James, and for me, it's helped me make sense of my life and the poor decisions I have made. It truly gave me an insight into my own self and made me understand. These are all pretty good things, right? 22 after 11. But why, if you like, would you change simply with the diagnosis? I need a little bit of help with that, I think. Wendy's in Eastbourne. Wendy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I met you in Lewis when I gave you that lovely picture. I don't know if you remember.
What, did you paint it yourself?
Yeah.
Yes,
And
of course I remember.
Beatles.
I said what?
I hope it's somewhere nice.
It is. It's in my study, actually. But do you know, my
nice.
study is a very good example of what we're talking about today, because I may struggle to find it, such as the nature of the piles of stuff that's there. But thank you, Wendy. That was very kind of you.
That's all right. It was lovely to meet you. Anyway, I got diagnosed in March with ADHD. Now, I've always had depression and felt different to everybody. I can talk to people and I've worked, etc., but I didn't ever feel the same as other people. And just quick 2 examples. I remember this is going back 20 years, someone said to me, when you come to a party, you're all, happy and all for 2 hours, and then you just go really quiet. And then someone at work said to me, do you think you've got ADHD? And I thought, well, no, because I'm not hyperactive. If anything, I'm the opposite.
Yes, that's a good point.
It's your head. It's not. It can be, especially in children, but it's actually in your head that you've got this. So, as I've grown up, when I was 7, I manifested OCD, which is quite young for OCD, which was very bad but got better. I've never liked myself, and I tell people that. No, I haven't. But I always say, oh, you're useless, you're lazy, you're this. But people have said, but you're lovely. And I say, but I'm not. So when I had this diagnosis, and mine is mild, so probably the same as you, I would have thought.
No, steady.
Well, if you have, you know.
No, I'm joking. I need to be clear. I think Ofcom are quite strict about this sort of thing. I don't have any qualifications in this field, and I don't think you do either. So we can't.
No.
You're just joining me in speculation, I think, Wendy.
Exactly. I'm speculating, but I did laugh when you said about the faces, because I love the faces you do when you're listening.
It's an acquired taste. Carry on.
Anyway, I do procrastinate, you know, and I think, I'm lazy. Or I will, like, at 10 o'clock at night think, actually, I'm going to do all the hoovering now. I sleep a lot. I'm anxious. I get burnt out. I've just left my job as a dental receptionist because it got so busy, and I'm 65. Yes. I could not cope with it anymore. I butt in a lot. So I do have to... and when that chap who texted you said about life choices, I'm on my third marriage. I've always been so impulsive, so everything made sense to me. And the reason it helped is I don't hate myself anymore. I understand myself, and I've looked more into, you know, and when you look into, obviously we're all slightly different, but... Yes. We all have the same, more or less, things that you do. So, you know, I think it would be worth it if you did want to, because it just... I don't know.
I'm doing what everyone's probably doing. Some of the things you say, I'm going, oh no, I'm not like that. I've just celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary. I'm more in love than ever.
Yes.
I'm not ticking that box.
That's lovely.
But then some of the other boxes that you tick, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that is me. But I don't want the conversation to be about me necessarily. I know I did introduce it like that, but that's so that people like you would feel comfortable talking about yourselves. I don't know that I'd probably get into trouble with Ofcom if I did a text vote on whether or not I've got ADHD. I don't think that would be very professional or necessarily very responsible.
But James,
why?
Nobody knows.
No,
yeah, I'm butting in now.
Well, that was the box I ticked when you said butting in. I thought, oh blimey, I'm probably a world champion at butting in. I'm a world champion interrupter, Wendy.
And if people talk slowly, that drives me mad as well.
Me too. Yeah, sometimes I've got the wrong job then.
It's impatient. It's everything.
That's why I finish callers' sentences. People will text me saying, "Why do you interrupt me?" I say, "Because I know what he's going to say."
Yes, or you want them to get on with it.
Get on with it. Yes.
So it's not the worst thing to have in the world. That's for sure.
No, I don't know. I think it's rather lovely in some ways just to know what it is that's going on. And that phrase you've got about not hating yourself anymore is incredibly poignant. That's incredibly poignant.
Yeah, it really has helped me.
I've never suffered from that, I have to be honest. I may have the opposite problem sometimes. Thank you, Wendy. How lovely. And thank you again for the painting. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. James is in Taunton. James, what would you like to say?
Hello there, yeah. First of all, I'm not in the least bit nervous because, after all, it's only you. But anyway, yes, I'm 61 now.
Right.
And I was diagnosed with ADHD 3 years ago. And I realised a couple of years before the diagnosis that I definitely had ADHD. And the difference it made to my life is just extraordinary.
How did you realise? How did you realise?
I had ADHD because my mother was, everyone just used to describe her as completely bonkers and, so hyperactive. She couldn't finish one sentence without starting another.
Right.
And I was actually trying to work out what on earth was wrong with her. And I came across ADHD, and there was an online test.
Oh, yeah.
So I sat down and started to do the online test from my mother's behalf.
Okay.
And about a quarter of the way through it, there was suddenly this huge light bulb moment, and I went, wait a minute. And that's me as well. It turns out that I think it's either 80 or 85% of people diagnosed with ADHD, it is hereditary.
Okay.
And so, I had my diagnosis, and I was, pretty much off the scale. I was right up there. It wasn't as if it was one test in my life that I passed with flying colours.
That's charming. You silly sausage. I love that. What is it? How do you describe it? You've described what your mum displayed. What did you display that you now understand was a consequence of the ADHD?
Well, having 1,000 thoughts jumping around in my head at once. It's like having a load of squirrels having a disco in your head.
Yeah.
All chattering at once, which makes it very hard to concentrate on anything. And as I said to your producer, I actually went to the same school as you and failed spectacularly. At O-levels. I was amazed it didn't boot me out. The A-levels where you don't have to remember things, you've either got it or you haven't. Sorry, the O-levels where you have to remember things. I was used geography, history, etc. I was used to that, but things like math, English, without doing any work, I got A's.
Okay.
And I thought there was.
So you were rubbish at revision then. You couldn't really revise even if you wanted to.
Not only that, I didn't have the motivation to actually sit there and revise.
That's the. I mean, this is what I'm enjoying about this conversation is the fact that everybody's going to be different, even as we discuss an umbrella under which lots of people sit. But you wanted to revise. This is something that's hard to explain. I know what you did. You wanted to revise. You probably could put some effort into making a revision timetable. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
With highlighter pens.
Yes, I could do all that, and it'd look absolutely wonderful. But when it came to actually abiding by what I decided I was going to do in that timetable, absolutely no chance whatsoever.
And it's so bizarre. And that's why I think that was helpful, wasn't it, when I talked about the kids for whom doing their homework is 2 out of 10 on the effort scale and the kids for whom it's 10. Because if you're on the 10, it's very hard for people on the 2, and most teachers are probably on the 2, to understand how hard it is for you. And that's when we end up getting called lazy or naughty.
I was constantly called lazy throughout my school career. And I knew I wasn't lazy, but I knew somehow I just couldn't do it. It was really, really quite bizarre. Did
you say you went to the same school as me? I think you said that.
Yeah, I was at Shack, yeah.
And they didn't pick up on this because you're a bit older than me. You mentioned your age at the outset, so it wouldn't even have been a thing then, would it?
No, I think that ADHD was first officially recognised as a condition by the NHS. I think it was 2003, maybe 2004, so it was relatively recently.
And what's changed now? You know you have got it.
It was. I've never been more happy being me, and I've never been more comfortable in my own skin.
Well, why?
All the things I used to beat myself up about constantly all my life, through being dysfunctional in various ways and being messy and forgetting things. I mean, I almost forgot to go to my sister's wedding years ago. And all those things I've been beating myself up about all my life, all of a sudden, I've been able to let it go, and it's just like this huge weight off my shoulders. It's quite extraordinary.
That's lovely to hear, isn't it? And I better late than never. So that sense of regret of not having done it sooner is overshadowed by the joy at having done it finally, having done it now.
Yes, absolutely.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
How bizarre!
It really was life changing,
and that's why we're talking. And that's why the diagnosis would be, because I don't want to turn it into a financial transaction, but you are going to be a happier citizen of a society, is a more productive citizen of society, not in terms of GDP necessarily, but just in terms of contributing to the general good. If you want to get utilitarian about it, thank you, James. Shack, for people who are interested. In the secret language of posh people, or at least public school educated people, Shack is short for Senior House, Ampleforth College. I should probably explain. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I haven't forgotten on this occasion, and thank you for reminding me. I don't think you can remind me too much, but it's a good one. Welsh farmer in financial stress pleads guilty to theft of 70 blank. What do you think the blank was? Quite a few people got this one right. The problem with getting it right is I never know whether you've made a genius guess, whether you've seen the story already, you've seen the headline already, or whether it's not actually a very good example of a missing word round, because the answer is quite obvious. The best ones are probably where you wouldn't guess it in a million years. Although sometimes it's a punchline, isn't it? Sometimes the missing word will be a punchline, which is the case with this one. Welsh farmer in financial stress pleads guilty to theft of 70 sheep. I mean, it would be, wouldn't it? 11:35 is the time. Here's one from Julie. Could you help with this, perhaps? Can you ask if there are any downsides to a diagnosis? I know I have ADHD. I have a professional job, and I've heard that it can impact negatively on things like car insurance. I love the positive stories you are sharing, but do wonder about the risks if you are perhaps, quotes, low level, end quotes, and a diagnosis would not necessarily change too much. I hope someone can answer that question, because I can't. And this message also it caught me. I think partly because it speaks so directly to the picture I tried to paint at the top of the show with children doing their homework. Charlotte writes, "Hi James, love the show. My son was diagnosed with ADHD inattentive subtype at 16. He's not hyperactive, but is distracted by his own thoughts, so it's not obvious to spot. The diagnosis was wonderful in making sense of so much and has brought us closer together. I just wish, in capital letters for wish, I wish I'd known earlier when he was at primary school and would smash his pencil into the wall as I tried to make him do his homework. It breaks my heart that I would get so cross with him when he wasn't being stubborn and obstinate. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. I will always feel guilty about that. Well, just as I'm not qualified to diagnose ADHD, I'm not qualified to counsel guilt, Charlotte, but you really shouldn't be feeling any, because you were behaving from a place of love, wanting him to get ahead at school, wanting him to get his homework done, wanting him to meet his responsibilities as a schoolboy, was all coming from a place of love, a place of maternal love. And the fact that he couldn't do it was coming from a place of brain chemistry over which you had no control. And the joy you take now in describing how it has improved your relationship and how happy you are that the diagnosis has brought you closer together means that guilt shouldn't. I know it's easy to tell other people not to feel guilty. The hardest thing in the world is to persuade ourselves that we shouldn't, but I really don't think you've got anything to feel guilty about. Truly. 11:37 is the time. Jake's in Hawthorne. Jake, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to speak to you finally after I've been listening to you for years. So this is a subject to speak to you on that's one that's quite close to, quite personal, quite hopefully quite a bit about. So I'm 40. I got a diagnosis about quite a few years ago now, for about 3 years. All of us have ADHD. I've got 2 daughters, married. My wife is also 40 years old.
Right.
She got her diagnosis about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Oh, crikey.
We first discovered, we started our journey when my youngest was struggling in lockdown. It was during homeschool, and we were trying our best. We were both working, as were many people trying to juggle.
Yes.
Suddenly having to become teachers and also work at the same time. And whilst my eldest was and hasn't really struggled too much academically, fortunately, my youngest was really struggling emotionally, and we was desperately trying to understand, how we could adapt to support that.
How interesting.
Fortunately, through my work, I've got private healthcare, so we went through a well-known company who went through a list of questions and said, perhaps you might want to look at an ADHD assessment. And we went through the assessment with her. And there's many, many different questions and things that you need to do. But whilst doing that an awful lot of alarm bells started ringing what they were saying as things I could relate to. And they had suggested that, I also, because it can be passed down, it tends to be hereditary. I think if...
what sort of alarm bells? What sort of things were the ones that make, hang on a minute, that's me. That's me, that is.
It's my youngest is really struggling with what they call ODD, it's oppositional defiance.
Right.
It's when it's something that you are interested in, you absolutely light up and can go full charge at it. It's something that, and I know that a lot of people have that, but when it's something that outright just is not in your interest, you almost physically can't force yourself to do it. It's like an actual impenetrable barrier. So in your mind, it's something that you should do. But the emotion, and as you say, the guilt, as many people, callers have said, that comes with that judgment is, why can't I force myself to do this? So many people are saying that because this has become very, very well known about now, obviously social media outlets, TikTok videos and everything else, people can relate to the challenges in a lot of ways. But I think that really dilutes the severity of how difficult it can be with this neurochemistry to force yourself with, because I really struggle with work. I'm a project manager. Now, the things that have kept me in the job is when something's on fire, something needs doing, the interpersonal communication skills, thinking outside the box, right, we've got a problem, who do we need to speak to, building relationships with people. Get me on a call. I'll talk till I'm blue in the face. To ask me to write that down and put that into some statement, I physically can't do. I have to physically force myself. And I have to say to my colleagues, whilst I'm on the call, just stay on. I'll do it whilst I'm here. I'm so sorry. If you could just hang fire, I'll do it now. Because if we don't do it now...
This is the dial, isn't it? This is the 2 out of 10 for most people, 10 out of 10 for you, just to do something that other people would consider to be absolutely run-of-the-mill.
Absolutely, and it's
so
not. But you're called. There's so much judgment that comes with. Why can't I just force myself to do?
And that's where the self-loathing comes. That's where the self-loathing comes from.
Absolutely, and that's where it was. So that's where the diagnosis is so important. It isn't making an excuse.
It is.
You're not excusing yourself. I'm still the same person with a diagnosis. We all are. My eldest has a hyperactive type. We all have combined type. We all present differently. There is no one-size-fits-all ADHD.
So I'm going to struggle. I'm going to struggle to do this thing, and I know I'm going to struggle to do this thing, and now I know why I'm going to struggle to do this thing, and it's not because I'm bad. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm ungrateful. It's not because I'm entitled. It's not because I'm arrogant. It's not because I think I'm better than everybody else. It's because I have this condition. That's what's going on when you have the diagnosis.
You can prepare for that, James. When you know that, the job that you're doing and the journey that you're on, and you can relate, but the job that you're in very much caters to one that actually plays to the strengths of ADHD.
I'm getting this a lot. I'm getting this a lot today, mate.
It really does, because you have to react in the moment. Thanks. You're thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead of where your call is going.
Yes,
right, okay, I think they're going in this direction. Right, I'll go to this bit next. You're thinking on your feet. You've got people telling you, right, you need to cut this bit short. That plays to every single strength, the ability to think on your feet in its instant. If you had to prepare a script for this and somebody said, right, this is exactly what you need to say here and there, remember your lines, it probably would be your downfall.
This is again, I'm only a small part of this conversation, but you are hitting some marks there. There was, I won't tell you who it was, but a bloke started working here many years ago who had a very long and glittering career in broadcasting, and obviously didn't have any of the things that you've just described, because he said to me, can I ask you a sort of private question? Do you mind, just between you and me? And I said, yeah, of course you can. And he said, you know those monologues you do in the morning? He said, do you write them yourself, or does your producer write them for you? And I thought, well, this is a bit awkward, because I don't know what's going to come out of my gob until the light comes on at 2 minutes past 10. And he didn't believe me. He just said, no, seriously, who does the note? I mean, you must have notes. Who does the notes? And I don't. So lots of broadcasters do have the scripts. Lots of broadcasters do have stuff written down in front. And I used to think, oh, God, that's not pure broadcasting. But it's nonsense. That's what works for them. And this is what works for me. But the point you're making is I don't have much choice in how I do those things.
No. But yeah, if you try and shoebox your job into, and you take away that creative sort of impulsivity, then you might struggle more with it.
Of course.
I personally, I am the only one of the 4 of us that's on medication. Okay. I've been on it now for a couple of years. It initially helped monstrously with work. I do actually like who I've always been. A bit lighter, a bit crazy, and, a bit impulsive. And people that know me, when I got my diagnosis, it was, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone that knows me kind of, they wasn't surprised. And my school reports, does well at speaking, oral exams, really struggles to get that pen on paper, really struggles to convey that. If only he could focus a bit more and put that to paper and show his working, he would do really well.
You'd look at the kid on the other side of the classroom and think that there must be something wrong with me, because he finds that so easy.
The medication does help. It really helps me with work. But it definitely has downs, because it wears off in the evening, and the evenings where I want to be my best for the family.
Oh, okay. I hear you. You want to be completely present, as it were, and
fun and light and airy, and it does rebalance your brain chemistry. And for everybody that's saying, it's everybody jumping on the bandwagon, it does affect your neurology. That what the medication does, and it in a non-neurodivergent brain, it would typically cause people to have the symptoms that ADHD presents. In an ADHD brain, you have a deficit of dopamine and executive functioning. The stimulant medication tends to cut
the other way. Yes, that's true in other areas as well. We're out of time, but final question.
Sorry, Ben.
What? If you can, in a couple of sentences, the difference between you as the family member who takes medication and the 3 family members who don't. How would you pinpoint that distinction?
For me, as a 40-year-old man, and the job that I do, I feel I need it to keep my job, unfortunately. I need a different job. For my family, they are amazing. They've owned it early. They're young. and they make the best of it. I'm so proud of them.
I bet you are, and I bet they're proud of you as well. Listen to this from David in Edinburgh. Your project manager has just described me better than anyone I've ever met. Absolutely amazing. I still don't know why. I still don't know why I would go and get a diagnosis, and part of the reason I think you've already provided, Jake. It just
don't feel like an imposter. Nobody should feel like an imposter. It's a journey of self-discovery that helps you understand yourself better.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Jake. 11:47 is the time. I may stay with this in the next hour because there's some magic happening, isn't there? And an awful lot of people feeling seen for the first time. Remember, I've got no qualifications, but I have got, I hope, some empathy and an ability to listen and occasionally even ask the right questions. But there is we haven't talked much, I don't think, this week about Israel and Gaza. We certainly got stuck in last week. I've got a guest coming into the studio shortly who is going to do what Kenneth Roth did when he was on Full Disclosure. Kenneth Roth, the head man at the Human Rights Watch for 30 years, explaining why the use of the word genocide is not just correct, but also necessary. And we're going to return to that territory with Dr. Alonso Gurmendi from the LSE after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time. A newsroom can be a strange place sometimes. I think there are parallels to be drawn with medics, actually. You have to have a not a warped sense of humour, but when you deal daily with things that others may find unbearable or traumatic, you can sometimes become a little bit inured to the sensitivity of the subject matter. And I mention that only because we were pontificating yesterday on whether or not the intervention of various celebrities would make much impact either on public discourse about Israel and Gaza or on Benjamin Netanyahu himself. And I was being the misery guts, pointing out that, you can laugh and mock these pop stars and these actors, but they're going to garner rather more media attention than people who are perhaps even better qualified, or rather much better qualified, to comment on the issues, which is why the celebrities were in the news yesterday, but earlier in the week, the 828 UK-based or qualified legal experts, including former Supreme Court justices, signed a letter to the Prime Minister warning that, and I quote, genocide is being perpetrated in Gaza. This is a consequence of Israel's latest blockade of food and aid and its new military offensive, which has killed hundreds of Palestinians in the past fortnight alone. And that was fresh in my mind when I stumbled across a film by Dr. Alonso Gurmendi, a fellow in human rights in the LSE's sociology department, on Blue Sky, that addresses essentially the question of why lawyers are now making the case that Israel is committing a genocide. And conscious though I am of how inflammatory this particular word is, and understandably and correctly so, we may have time to examine that element of the conversation shortly, but we will begin, Alonso, if we may, with what you describe as a consensus. What underpins this consensus now that the word is appropriate?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And also, I'm a lawyer by training. I was one of the signatories of that letter.
No, I realise that. Sorry, I should have said.
No, it is important, I think, to call things what they are, I think. And there's a broader debate to have, and we can talk about it later. But I think what's important is to notice that genocide is a specific typified conduct. It's something that you do with a specific intent. And when that happens, it's important to call it that. And I think from the analysis that me and I think most of the people that study genocide have concluded, Israel has committed the conduct, and it has demonstrated expressly the intent to destroy the people of Palestine, of Gaza. So when you add those two, you get genocide. That's basically it.
And it can be both remove and extinguish. It doesn't have to be kill. It can simply be.
So one thing that is important to know is, technically, from the definition of genocide, you don't really need to kill anyone to commit genocide. Like, you can commit genocide just by transferring children from one group to another, and none of them die. And that is still
you're wiping out an identity, essentially.
There is some debate as to what is the distinguishing factor between ethnic cleansing and genocide. That is kind of a problem that was put in by the International Court of Justice when it was dealing with Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia. But I think this idea that it is either ethnic cleansing or genocide is not really very credible and not many people subscribe to it. Of course, a campaign of ethnic cleansing can be genocidal if it's committed with the intent to destroy the group.
And so if we had to put into two sentences what it is about the current blockade, the latest blockade and the new military offensive that fulfills this criteria in a way which those criteria were not being fulfilled necessarily, well, at all from the outset. What do we put in that box?
Well, I think the clearest conduct, let's start with conduct and before we get into intent, the clearest conduct is the subjection of Palestinians in Gaza to conditions of life that will elicit their destruction as a group. They cannot exist as a group anymore in Gaza because there are no homes, there's no electricity, there's no hospitals, there's no universities, there's mosques are being blown out, entire neighborhoods are being flattened, not during hostilities, mind you, but like when the hostilities end in controlled explosions. So I think that is the most clear act. Then there's also, of course, the disproportionate killing. I think even Israel's allies are concluding now that the killing of Palestinians in Gaza is completely disproportionate. It's done by AI software. It's done through kill zones. This idea that it is exclusively happening when there is someone underneath a hospital in a tunnel is not really true. And so there are more, but
of course.
But let's say those two things, coupled with the continuous and throughout the entire hierarchy of Israel's state apparatus, from head of state, ministers, military officers, and soldiers, all repeating the same kind of language of there are no uninvolved civilians, we need to destroy the seed of Amalek from the world, and these are human animals. When you couple those two, you get a genocide.
I mean, for me, that was an early stumbling point. The likes of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and others in that administration were not even hiding their hopes that this kind of conduct would occur, and yet hoping for it doesn't qualify as doing it. Is it too crass to look for dates, to look for a pivotal point when a line was crossed, when genocide became applicable in ways that it hadn't been previously?
I think we as humans are able to see when something is off. Like if you
didn't the Irish go there in February of 2024? I forget whether they used the word or whether they just ramped up the response to much higher levels than other Western countries had done at that point.
So I think the first one to say the word was Ras Siegel. It was like 10 days after, saying there was a textbook case of genocide. If you look at other genocides, it took Romeo Dallaire 3 days to send a letter to the United Nations saying there's going to be a genocide in Rwanda. 3 days. He had a conversation with an informant on, I think, January 8th of 1994. And by January 11, he was warning the UN. The UN did not listen. And by April, there was a genocide. So it really, I don't think we should focus on at what point.
No, I know.
But rather the whole process. This is important with sharing isolated snippets of the head of state or the head of government talking is also probably not enough. People say horrible things sometimes, and that does not mean that a genocide is happening. But when you couple that with soldiers, with military officers, with the entire government saying the same things over and over again repeatedly, then you need to start to listen.
And these are the dots that you've joined together in the film that you've posted on social media, because there's a lot of moving parts to the argument. Why does it matter so much that this word, if indeed you think it does, I presume you do because you've put so much work into justifying its use, why does it matter so much that this incredibly inflammatory, particularly for obvious reasons in the context of an Israeli government, why does it matter so much that this word is in the vocabulary of public discourse?
Because I think it is important to accept that the international community, the global order that we have today, was pretty much born out of several genocides. The entire experience of colonialism was littered with genocides. And it took us until 1948 to sort of accept, this is a thing that happens. This is a thing that has happened in the past many times, not just during the Holocaust, but of course during the Holocaust. And being in this situation where we know that genocide happens a lot, you cannot construct a definition of genocide that is continuously reduced in scope. The Balkan Wars were not a full genocide. Only Srebrenica was a genocide. And with legal standards that now force us to try and reduce the amount of things that we can call a genocide, that happens every time there's a genocide. There's people that try to narrow down the definition so that their specific genocide is not a genocide. And every year or every genocide, we chip away a little bit of the word and a little bit of the word. And at the end of the day, if you have a definition of genocide that is so narrow that nothing is a genocide, arguably a lot of the Holocaust would not even cover as a genocide, because like if genocide is only the systematic extermination of people as of 1941 with the final solution, then Kristallnacht was not genocidal. And I fundamentally disagree with that. So we need a definition of genocide that is workable, not designed from the perspective of how do I make this thing that we are committing that I don't want to be a genocide, not a genocide, and start looking at the whole process holistically, because genocide is an integral part of the history of the world.
And this is, if you want to explore it further, exactly the subject of Alonso's video essay, which is on YouTube and indeed on Blue Sky, on his account and indeed on mine. Thank you, Dr. Alonso Gurmendi, from the London School of Economics, Sociology Department. You also blog, I think, at Opinio Juris, is that right?
Yeah, I blog Opinio Juris and I have a Twitch channel. I'm trying to be more like accessible. Like, academia is too ivory towery, I think. So we need to like get out there, I think.
As do my holiday cover.
Of course.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
It's 12 noon.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. We'll return to the ADHD territory. I don't want to do 2 hours on it because I suspect colleagues later in the day will want to talk about it with you as well. And I don't think repetitious is quite the right word, but I do. I want to bring something else into the conversation, which is not necessarily the most important issue facing the nation at the moment, or indeed the world. I think my last guest probably addressed one of the most important issues currently facing the world. But this is something that is going to resonate with a lot of people. It's either going to resonate with you quite a lot or not at all. And that is always interesting. And it's something that resonates with me. It's about pets. It's about pet owners who are absolutely convinced that they've been rinsed by their vets. And I can't believe some of the stories that I've heard in this field. I can't believe how much it costs to have a poorly animal. I do this thing, and we have insurance for our pets. And to the best of my knowledge, we've got great vets, and the prices that we pay are normal across the whole sector. But I mean, goodness me, where does it go? It's a bit like care homes, where you look at the amount of money and you can't believe that these places are being run on a shoestring, or that there's not enormous profits being made. And I remember when we discovered that undertakers were all owned by the same massive company, or that a huge number of undertakers that appeared to be local and independent, because they were called things like Keith and Sons, and they sat on your high street and they'd been there for years, but they'd actually been bought up, which meant that there was no point shopping around, because all of the apparently independent undertakers were actually owned by the same people. Listen, that's a broad generalisation. There are, of course, still independent undertakers, and we've had some of our strangest phone-ins over the years about why we don't haggle more when we're burying a loved one or when we're bidding farewell to a loved one. And the message we always take away from that programme is the same. It's one of my favourite phone-ins. It's got easier the further we've moved away from the last time I needed to be visiting an undertaker, but it always ends in the same way. We should definitely haggle more, but I'm not going to. You take the calls from the people who do, the people who actually say, "Well, no," I said, "Can we do this?" And we could. I know it's what Mum would have wanted, James. Mum was a market trader. She'd have been gutted if she thought I'd just gone in there and taken the first offer. Or my father was a city trader. There's no earthly way he'd have accepted. So it is the strangest thing about human nature, in a way. Of course you should haggle. You shouldn't take the first price that an undertaker offers you. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I remember when I was arranging my late father's funeral. I don't know why I said late there. I wouldn't be arranging... Well, maybe some people arrange their funerals while they're still alive. But I was arranging my late father's funeral. And some of the little accoutrements were absurdly expensive. And there was a little bit of me that thought, well, it's my dad. I want to give him the best send-off possible. Of course I'm going to pay for the solid gold coffin handle or whatever it was. And then I happily heard in the back of my mind, I heard my dad's voice. Dad was from Yorkshire and was in many ways a typical Yorkshireman. And the idea of I mean, I don't think there were solid gold coffin handles. It's a figure of speech, but you take my point. And it feels a little bit like that to me. It feels a little bit like that. There are going to be quite a few stories like this from Sam. £90 for painkillers for my dog. I got home, checked online, looked up exactly the same medication, and they cost £7.50. So the story is about the complaints system not being fit for purpose. And this comes from Which. We like Which, the consumer watchdogs. The process under which an ordinary schmo like me or you could actually lodge a complaint against the Goliath that is corporate veterinary care is ludicrous. Even if you do raise a problem successfully, you've got very limited options for taking it further. The Competition and Markets Authority is already investigating the veterinary sector because the prices are beginning to... Well, I'll read you the technical term and then I'll translate it into James O'Brienese. Is that all right? So the technical terms are... price increases and other practices. The veterinary sector, amid concerns that above-inflation price increases and other practices mean customers are not getting a fair deal, which, if I translate into James O'Brienese, means these prices are just implausible. They make no sense. So, let's say you've got a dog with a busted ligament on their leg, and they say that's going to be £6,000. I do this thing where I what do poor people do? So I move in a very middle-class milieu, as you know. Not entirely, actually. I shouldn't do myself down for being entirely insulated from reality. Not only do I get to talk every day to people from very different situations from mine, but also, my friendship circle is pretty diverse. I've got friends who run out of money before the end of the month. And the idea of having to find £5,000 for a vet's bill would be about as likely as them managing to get to the moon and back by the weekend. And so I don't know what you do when you find yourself in these situations. But I do know that if you've got the money, or you can raise the money, or you can find the money, then your pet's health, as we've discussed a little bit more intelligently, I hope, in recent years than I used to do when we came to subjects of, quotes, excessive, end quotes, concern for a pet, you will find it. You will go without to look up. People just do, okay? Whether you like it or not, people just do. We've talked about people who love their pets more than they love their children. We talked very recently, I think just 2 weeks ago, about people who now treat their pet like a child because for whatever reason they've realised that they're not going to have a pet. They're not going to have a child in life when they previously presumed that they would. So they bestow. It was an interesting study, wasn't it, about the psychological act of bestowing on a pet some of the emotional needs you have as an adult, as a human, that would normally be reserved for a child. I did not say that I've got working class friends, all right? So stop Rishi Sunaking me. I said I've got a diverse friendship group, and that is a bridge I'm prepared to die on. I did not say that I have I've got lots of friends. I've got upper class friends. I've got middle class friends. I've got working class. No, I haven't got working class. I did not say that. All right, Rishi Sunak, writes Ross, and he's not the only one. So a shout out to the PDSA, the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals. Obviously, they can do a job for an awful lot of people. I think you've got to prove need in some way. But and no, Brian, I didn't used to work in McDonald's. You see, you can't be a middle-class cliche in this country, can you, without opening yourself up to all the usual abuse when you point out that your universe is not entirely middle-class. Let's just talk about money. All right? So... I mean, there aren't many people who can find £5,000 without a struggle. So you've got a dog with a poorly leg. It's going to be £5,000. Are we insured? Yeah, but the excess is £500 and you're only insured up to the first 2,000. Oh, so this is a 4-figure payday. What does it involve? Well, it's an operation and then about 6 weeks of recuperation. So someone somewhere is getting £5,000 or £6,000 for an hour's work. Now, you have to pay for the nurse, you have to pay for the reception, you have to pay for the premises, you have to pay for the surgery, you have to pay for equipment. But if you're doing 6 a day, at £6,000 a pop, I can't help thinking that somebody somewhere is, to coin a phrase, having a laugh. To coin a phrase that me and my working class friends often use, having a laugh, having a giraffe guff. I'll stop now. So, what's going on? 0345 6060 973. I mean, what is going on? I don't want to unfairly malign anybody. I really don't. I'm a big fan of fairly maligning people, but I don't want to unfairly malign anybody here. But some of the numbers that I hear and some of the figures that you are already sharing with me are absolutely remarkable. I want to know what we think is going on. But I also want to know, and I make no apology for finding this fascinating, any more than I apologise for enjoying documentaries about fare dodgers that aren't presented by Robert Jenrick. I also want to know about the egregious examples of what we consider to be vets rinsing indulgent pet owners, because I just find them a curious mixture of hair-raising and hilarious. You paid what? For what? It's got to be vets, and I'm not interested in the fancy beds that you buy or the chicken livers that you chop up personally so that little Fifi can have a nice breakfast. I just can't quite believe that the numbers that we see. We've got 3 cats and a dog, and they're generally pretty healthy. But I tell you what, if one of them starts ailing, I can feel an ache in my wallet. If one of them actually starts looking a bit green around the gills, I can feel an ache in my wallet. My wallet starts throbbing. Oh my days! I'm terrified of what's going to come back from the vets. And we've got insurance, but it doesn't. I don't understand these things. It doesn't kick in until a certain level has been reached, and it doesn't apply to certain things. And you know, some of the stuff is this, and some of the stuff is that. So, what's going on? 0345 60060973. That's what I want to know. And I mean, either inside information. Again, I don't want to malign vets. I was going to say some of my best friends are vets. That's not true. But I've got a couple of mates who are vets, and they do a bang-up job, and they don't seem to be living in houses made out of gold bricks and driving around in Rolls Royces. But where does all the money go? And what happens when you try to complain? So Which spoke to 1,000 pet owners who'd experienced some kind of problem with their vet over the past 2 years, with pricing being the most common issue raised. Listen, if you're worried about your pet, you often don't even ask how much it's got. Money's no object. Nothing's too good for Rover. And then you get the bill and you go, holy moly, would it have been cheaper to amputate? Probably not, actually. Don't judge me, but I've looked into that. It is absolutely shocking, some of the numbers that are in place. How do they compare with human health costs? I don't know. But why would they be cheaper if you need the same sort of equipment, the same level of qualification, the same facilities? Same personnel? I don't know. So you've got poor quality care, inadequate customer service, all that kind of thing. I think that not being able to believe what you've been charged is that's more than half of the complaints that have been brought. And it may well be that we're just wrong, we're just naive, and that these prices are completely permissible, absolutely kosher, but I doubt it. 0345 60060973. I want your egregious examples. And I want your experiences of trying to complain. And if you have an insight into the industry, I'm open to the idea that there's nothing dodgy going on at all. I truly am. But I mean, at this point in proceedings, it looks that. I mean, a recent X-ray for a dog. This is just the first text at the top of my inbox. 850 quid. How much of that is profit? And who can tell us? Well, let's find out.
James O'Brien on LBC.
A very funny message earlier today from someone who, I presume you weren't watching Fox News. I presume it just popped up on your feed. But the Fox News was carrying a caption across the bottom of the screen. I used to know the word for that. It said, "Why can't you tickle yourself?" And someone sent me a message saying, "James, Fox News have nicked Mystery Hour." I thought that was absolutely bang on the money. In fact, I should give you a proper mention for contributing such. It was Janet on Blue Sky. He said, "Fox News are stealing Mystery Hour, James." They had a thing across the bottom of the screen where it said, "Why can't you tickle yourself?" I think we've done that. We have actually. I know for a fact we've done that one. I think it made the board game. But that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about vets, costs and suspicions. Kim's in Thurrock. Kim, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good afternoon, James. Long time listener, first time caller.
Welcome.
Thank you. What it is, 2 weeks ago today, my little dachshund was struggling to walk. So I got an appointment with a vet late afternoon, and the lady felt around his tummy and his back and diagnosed pancreatitis. But the only way to prove this is with a blood test,
right?
Which they do on site, which is fine. I said, okay, carry on. After telling me it was £280, by the way.
For a blood test?
So just for a blood test, £280.
So see, now you and I, we're balking at this, right?
Yeah, well,
you're going to pay it because you're going to pay it because you love the dog.
Exactly.
But we've got no idea whether that's. It's like being at the Undertaker's. I hope that's not too morbid. We've got no idea what is a reasonable price for this.
Well, no, not at all. And it would have been fine if the diagnosis had been correct.
Right.
But when it was proved that it wasn't correct, and we had to have further investigations. And we had to go to another one. I can't name the vet, obviously, but to another where they have a 24-hour service because it's now getting late into the evening.
Right.
They gave me a 9 o'clock appointment, and the vet there said, right, we're going to have to sedate him and X-ray him, which they did. That's £800, by the way. So
for the X-ray, so you're in the hole for £1,100.
Yes, you're absolutely spot on, and I get 10% discount because he's got a plan there where he gets checked every 6 months, his well-being and his flea and.
Was he all right? I mean, what was it?
Well, it's like we've got discs between our spines. Well, one of his like stenosis of the spine.
Yeah.
And it's quite painful. But then we have to move on. He's going to be on meds for the rest of his natural life, of course. They give me, including the £800, about 15 mil of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so I inquired at the vet and said, I should also mention, if it deteriorates further, he'll need an MRI scan at £4,000 and surgery at £6,000.
Yeah, that's it, £6,000.
Well, 10,000 for the two, obviously.
Yeah, well done.
Maths O level. Can't beat a maths O level, can you?
And I mean, we've got no idea, am I right? Whether or not we're being rinsed or whether or not this is absolutely what you're going to have to pay.
Well, actually, I've got a slight inkling into it with the meds because the meds, when I phoned up the vets for the meds, they said 100 mil of this Rumacam is £68. So obviously you go straight online and have a look. I can get 200 mil of exactly the same thing, the same packaging from a pharmacy for £22. That's twice as much for a third of the price.
But you're paying for the prescription.
You're
paying for the prescription of it as well, aren't you? Not. I don't mean the prescription in a human sense. I mean, you and I wouldn't know that that's what you needed. So they've used their expertise, for which we should pay, to identify the drug that's needed. But the boost on it, the markup's bloody extraordinary.
Well, exactly. But I had to get the prescription from the vet at a cost of £25 to attach that to an email to send, so they know that this is all verified and legitimate. So, and then
I think it's the Undertakers. It's the same as the Undertakers. There's two things going on here. I'm reading, because someone's just sent me the article, that there are now 6 corporate chains that own 60% of the UK's vets. So that has parallels with the undertaking business. And the other thing that has got a parallel with it is that if you query it, it feels like you don't love your animal enough. Do you know what I mean?
Guilty,
do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, well, okay, yeah, all right, I'll look into that then, sir, if you want.
Well, I did query it. I did query it up to a point with when I went to get the prescription from the vets. I said, look, why can't I just buy this from you?
Yeah.
And she said, but I said it's £68. Why is it so expensive?
Yeah.
And she didn't answer the question, a bit like political, really. She just said, have you got insurance? And I said, well, no. And she said, I don't blame you for buying the cheapest option. So it almost implies they're ripping off the insurance companies who are then ripping you off for the premiums because they're going to get ripped off for the vets.
It'll come back round again. Right, so, I mean, rinse or not rinse, you're going for rinse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. That's the phone-in. Rinsed or not rinsed. I mean, are we being rinsed or are we not being rinsed? I think Kim's being rinsed. And I don't know if there's any alternative analysis of it. Great piece here, which I missed at the time, in what newspaper is it? It's The Guardian, I think, by Rupert Neate, which was published, about a year ago, in April of last year. It tells the tale of a rabbit. It tells the tale of a rabbit called Honey and a 46-year-old civil servant who owned it. and the rabbit wasn't very well. So they took it to the vet, the rabbit, that is. And the vet said he thought she should stay in overnight and that would cost 900 quid. Or that we could take her home and it would be 200 quid. It didn't feel like much of a choice. It was presented as, this is what I just said to Kim, you have to do that because if you don't, it proves you don't care about your rabbit. How can it cost 900 quid to keep a rabbit in a hutch overnight? I mean, crikey, you could get a room at Claridge's for that. Couldn't you? Well, I need to check. I haven't checked the prices at Claridge's for 30 years, but you could certainly get a very nice hotel. You get a nice Airbnb, nice hotel, £900. Ugh. And then, I mean, it's a good story. It's a good article, actually. But then after the treatment and the expenditure of more than £1,200, they suggested that the rabbit be put down anyway. She should probably spend another night in intensive care. She was discharged the following morning, but when they took Honey back to the family home, she was really dozy and rapidly deteriorating, so she went back to the vet to have her put to sleep. If you turned up, it's not. Well, this is where it differs from the Undertaker element of the story, isn't it? Because obviously your pet's still alive, but possibly shouldn't be. And the vet's going to take you for 1,200 quid before revealing that, frankly, you should probably have gone for the put-to-sleep method in the first place. There's a lot going on here. Robert's in Guildford. Robert, what have you got?
Yeah, hi, James. I felt pretty compelled to call because I recently had quite an unfortunate experience with my British blue cat, Paddington. So we were away for the evening, myself, my wife and my son.
Yeah.
Got a call at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning, sort of 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And my wife's brother's standing in the emergency vet in Guildford. He puts us on the phone to the vet, and she says, right, your cat's been run over, or we think he's been run over. He's broken his leg. He's smashed two of his teeth. His eye's not looking too good.
Oh, dear.
And she sort of said, right, well, you've got two options. Either I can put him down now, or I can do a X-ray on him to see if he's got internal bleeding. If he hasn't, then we can sort of patch him up. So my son had woken up at this point. He's saying, oh, come on, Dad, you need to do the X-ray. So I said to her, right, how much for the X-ray? £2,380. To do an X-ray, just the X-ray. Now, to put that into context, my wife's also got a horse, and she'd had the vet come out on the Friday, 2 days before, to do an X-ray on his hoof, and they charged us £250. So I'm saying to her, well, this is absolutely ridiculous. And she says, well, we're the only vet that's open.
Take it or leave it. And your son's going to hate you. Your son's not only going to hate you for the rest of his life, he's going to have trauma that is going to cost you a fortune in therapy if you don't stump up the money for the...
And she was so callous. She literally said, well, I can put him down or you can pay for the X-ray. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I'll pay for the X-ray. She said, you need to pay half up front now. So I'm scampering around trying to find a credit card, trying to read it in the dark without my glasses. So eventually get all that sorted out. They call us the next day, keep him in overnight, call us the next day and say, right, good news, no internal bleeding.
Yeah.
He now needs to have his leg put back together. So I'm going, right, how much is that? Has to go to a specialist vet, £6,000. So at this point, I'm sort of, I'm committed.
Yeah.
I'm in, I haven't really got any choice.
Why not? Just tell me why not. I know why not, but I want to hear it in your words.
Well, I can't, I'm not going to put down a perfectly sound cat. If they'd have said he's got internal bleeding, and there's nothing we can do, then fair enough. But, they can patch him back together.
Right.
Plus, he's my son's cat. I mean, I'm not really into cats, but he's sort of like a dog cat. He's big, great British blue.
Yeah, I know the type you mean. Yeah. Oh, Lord.
So I then do that.
Six more. Go on. Sorry, I'll stop. I'll stop interrupting.
So if that's not bad enough, so I'm going, right, okay. And then they say, and he has to have two of his teeth extracted. So I'm saying, well, can you do that at the same time he's having his leg done?
I like the way your mind works.
No, we can't do that because it's cross-contamination.
Right.
And so I'm like, right, okay, so how much to get the teeth out? Another £2,000.
£1,000 per tooth?
Correct. To extract them and do root canal.
I feel I should have a Tony Hancock-style punchline at this point in the conversation, but I've got nothing, Robert. I've got nothing. So, that's practically an armful.
So there I am. I'm £10,000 in, and I'm saying to my wife, well, that's the summer holiday done with.
Holy moly.
It's just unbelievable. They are like the mafia. They are these vets now, and going back to the earlier caller of the point about these veterinary chains, all the local vets, they're all being bought up, and they're just rigging all the prices. And it is like a bloody cartel. I mean, I don't know how they get away with it.
And the horse vet would be different because they're agricultural. They're dealing with...
and they're also, generally, the horse vets are more, independently owned. So, they're more interested in looking after their customers and getting repeat business and everything else.
I'm sure your wife is very close to her horse, but I imagine that the farming community is a lot less dewy-eyed about these matters than the pet-owning community. I suspect there's
100%.
a heck of a lot
100%.
more money to be made out of British Blues than there are out of, I don't know,
and he's a
Gloucester
young
Old
cat.
Spots.
He's only 3 years old. So, if he was like, an old cat, maybe you'd think differently. But, anyway, so that was my experience, and it was incredibly painful.
Were there any cars outside in the car park of the vets, like Aston Martins?
I don't know. I don't know.
You'd wonder, wouldn't you? Yeah. Well, you're a very good storyteller, Robert. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that before. But I mean, to be fair, you were working with some pretty special material. But that is, yeah. What's the cat's name?
Paddington.
Oh, you said at the beginning, of course. Yeah, thank you. 12:30 is the time. That right? Well, I'm not even checking with the contributor. That's another one for rinsed. So it's rinsed. No one really having a crack at explaining to us why this is reasonable or fair. Some funny jokes coming in. The cat could have gone to Turkey for $2,000. That's good. That's a funny joke, isn't it? I'd like that joke. It's about cosmetic surgery and dentistry and all that kind of thing. But do we know what's going on? 12:31 is the time. And Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I just sort of reflecting on that Jerry Adams story. If you haven't heard it, it was in the news bulletin there, winning a libel case against the BBC, former leader of Sinn Féin, a £100,000 settlement, I think. It's mad how the world turns, isn't it? In my lifetime, and quite possibly in yours, Jerry Adams wasn't allowed to talk on the television. This is under Margaret Thatcher's rule. The Sinn Féin members would talk, and then an actor would speak. So you'd watch Jerry Adams's face, and you'd watch his lips move, but an actor would be... I can't even remember what the logic was behind that. And now he's taking the national broadcast, he's taking the state broadcaster to court for $100,000. It's extraordinary how the pendulum swings. Because normally you sort of read about the fella in Syria who used to be a sort of fully paid up member of what are prescribed terrorist organisations and is now getting the red carpet treatment from Western leaders, having got rid of Bashar al-Assad. And you sort of have a little bit of colonial arrogance, I think. You sort of, well, gosh, that's how Johnny Foreigner does things, it's certain. But here we are, you've got the leader of Sinn Féin who was once unable to talk on British television. Actors with strong Northern Irish accents have never got so much work. Would have to voice his interview, and now he's taking the BBC to court. Anyway, we're talking about vets, we're talking about suspicions, and we're talking about costs. Laura is in Sheffield. Laura, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James.
Hello, Laura.
So your question, rinsed or unrinsed?
Yes.
I'm 100% rinsed.
Everyone is. Everyone is.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Just coming at this, I suppose, a bit different, sort of from two angles, really. So I used to actually be a veterinary nurse for 10 years, and I actually left the profession because of this exact situation. So I worked in a fantastic practice. We had 4 vets, 4 nurses. It was brilliant, and I thoroughly loved it until one of the vets, who was obviously the owner, unfortunately sold the practice to a large national company. Okay. And within a couple of months of them sort of moving in, they bring in, a couple of their own vets. It was all targets. It was how many add-ons can you do for things. So like the guy was saying there about the cat with the leg, we need to take out a tooth. It will have been an add-on. So I remember, we'd be in the back and we'd have sort of a youngish dog come through for a dental, and you'd kind of get the dog anaesthetised, open its mouth, and I remember just looking at my colleague, and we were like, what are we doing? Yeah. There was nothing wrong with this dog's teeth. We kind of gave them a quick scale, and that was it, But the owners had obviously come in for a check. Oh, yeah, see what you can bump on. And dentals were the easiest thing to do because, particularly with cats and things, people don't want to look in a cat's mouth, so they take the vet's words for it. It became unbearable for me. I couldn't bear seeing elderly people in tears and choosing to have animals put to sleep simply because of the cost. I couldn't do it anymore. One of the worst ones I saw was a very elderly guinea pig got brought in with a family with a couple of little kids. Yeah. and you did not need to be a vet to know that this guinea pig was on its last legs. It was flat as a pancake. It was really old, laid on its side, and they said, we're going to x-ray it. And I just again, we're kind of thinking, why are we x-raying this at this age, the age it's at and the state it's in? Now, normally to do an x-ray, you need at least sedation, if not, an anaesthetic. This little guinea pig went in, it laid flat on the x-ray plate and didn't move because that's how ill it was.
So it didn't need any sedation?
No, it didn't move. They took the x-ray, and whilst the x-ray was developing, they put it back in one of the little, the little cages in the back room, and it died whilst it was in there.
Oh.
And they still charged that family for that x-ray. And their bill was some ludicrous amount.
Go on, how much? Can you remember?
I mean, it's going back a few years. I'd say it was about £600. And they basically took their little dead guinea pig away with them.
Oh.
And I just thought, and that was it, literally.
This is terrible.
That evening, I wrote my resignation, and I've never gone back to it. And now I'm kind of further down the line. I've got my own pets, and we're going through this now with my dog. You go in, and it is like being held to ransom because you love your animals,
you do.
And obviously because I'm sceptical, I can sometimes kind of go, no, we don't need those. He's in for this.
I wouldn't have the confidence to do that.
Exactly, and people don't. Because you want to trust them, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that the vets that are working there do it because they love animals.
Well, they wouldn't do all the years of training unless you wanted to.
Exactly.
But if the only places you can get jobs are the ones that, and presumably there's venture capital behind the scenes somewhere in all of this, and that is judged solely by how much profit you can make.
100%, and it's those add-ons, and even things like when we used to do. So if the dog was in for a dental, for example, we used to cut its nails and things like while it's asleep, just to make people's life. Maybe if it had a bit of matted fur, we'd sort that out. Now they would never do that. That'd all be added on. We can do it, but we'll have to be this.
They charge for all of it.
Yeah, my dog's been in this week because he's 10 years old. He's a Labrador, and he's not really enjoying his food.
Oh dear.
So I've taken him in. The first day we went in, he was given antibiotics. Those antibiotics for 10 tablets cost £100.
It can't be right, can it?
Every tablet I'm giving him is £10. He had those. They made him sick, so he's now had to go back in for blood tests. It was £388 for a blood test, which all came back clear, by the way.
How much could you do a blood test for with your expertise?
Well, that was it. That was the actual humorous thing. They were really short-staffed, and they were saying that they would have to take him in the back and sedate him. And I said, I used to be veterinary, so I'll do it for you. So I actually held him. I actually held the vein, and we got it. I thought, well, I should have got a discount, really.
And they still charge you top whack for that?
Yeah.
Oh, they saw you coming. That's double rinsed.
Yeah.
That's double rinsed. You should have charged them labour.
That's me, James.
That's it. So what? I mean, what did you need to do that? Just a syringe and the knowledge of how to get a vein up?
Oh, it's a knowledge, isn't it? And I suppose.
But it's not 380 quid's worth of knowledge.
Well,
is it?
I mean, personally, I don't think so. No,
you could do 10 an hour, could you, if there was a conveyor belt?
Oh God! I mean, it took less than 5 minutes.
And you did half the work.
They have to process it. But they then have to process that blood, and presumably it goes off to a lab unless they've got one in house and stuff. So I get that there's a cost to it, and I'm quite happy to pay. But it's like, what level is this coming at? You know what I mean? It's like there's no way those antibiotics are costing £10 per antibiotic.
No,
not a chance.
Of course, and there's no way that. I mean, how much of that do we reckon? How much of that blood test is going to be profit?
Massive amount. I wouldn't even hazard a guess. But I mean, I obviously, working in the vets, I saw the markup on the drugs from what we were charging from what they were coming in.
You're not going to argue. You're not going to argue.
No, you can't if you need them. The dog needs the drugs, so I'm going to buy them.
And that's what this article pins it down. The vets presented it as if you care, you pay.
100%.
If you don't pay, you don't care.
Yeah, I mean the worst one, James. This is like the worst one I had personally. We had a hamster. Now, the hamster got a bad eye. He was quite old. Took him to the vets. They charged me £56 for some eye drops for the hamster. We put those in for 2 days. He got much worse. I took him back in. He had to be put to sleep. It cost £77.
Yeah.
Now, that cost me £120, right? That hamster cost me £8 from the pet shop. So I paid £8 for the markup on it. When you look at it like that, you kind of go, this is crazy. And I did it. I mean, he was an old hamster. And if I didn't care, I'd have just left him and he probably will have died in a few days. But I'm not going to leave an animal to suffer.
No. I mean, no one is, you see.
Exactly.
Final question. Why? How can it be 900 quid to keep a rabbit in a vet's overnight?
Well, again, this is the thing, because they say it's intensive care. It's not. It'll be someone will have nipped in, given it some fluids, subcutaneously. So they will have done that, I'm sure. But it's not as if someone sat by that rabbit's bedside looking after. Not a chance. This is why they have out of hours practices now, because vets aren't staffed overnight. So unless it was actually put into an out of hours one, it wouldn't have even had anybody there to look at it.
Again, you're not going to question it. And if anything happens to it overnight and it passes away, they're just going to say, "Well, that's a shame." That's why he was in intensive care, because he was quite vulnerable, and turns out he died.
Exactly.
Rinse. There we go. And that is perfect. The idea of you as a former veterinary nurse actually contributing to the rinsing of yourself, because that's what you do. That great line there in this article. The vet presented it as, if you care, you pay. And I am adding to that, because, of course, this is the immediate subtext of it, is that if you don't pay, you don't care. Oh, Robert's in South Woodford. Robert, what would you like to say?
James,
yes.
I'm so glad you're doing this. I've had a recent experience, but firstly, I must tell you, I'm 71 years old.
Yes.
I've got a 15-year-old Kia Picanto that cost me £280 to insure.
Gosh.
My dog cost £750 to insure. I've got a very, very healthy dog. I've been with this insurance company for years and years and years, and every time I speak to them on the renewal, I said, "How can you keep doing this? How can you?" And they just say, "Well, it's the age of the dog, blah blah blah." Wow. I've got a very, very healthy dog.
But they know that if anything happens to it, the vets are going to take you for thousands of pounds.
But there's a lot of people out there, and we've got this dog walkers group, and I'm so glad you're doing this, because I've told them that there needs to be some investigation after my recent experience. And, something needs to be done. But anyway,
what happened? What's your recent experience? Well, first of all, just let me explain to people listening that a Kia Picanto is a motor car. Because people might have thought that it was an exotic. People might have thought it was an exotic breed of salamander, Robert. That you're walking around South Woodford with a Komodo dragon on a lead or something like that. But I've
got a very, very healthy 8-year-old border collie, my best mate. Anyway, went in for a checkup for something, and then the vet said, "Well, he's got to have his teeth cleaned. It's not looking good." And I said, okay. And so I took him in last week and had it done. And it's not covered, just it's got a routine dental treatment. It's not covered by insurance. And so I went to the counter afterwards, £1,060. This is just to descale his teeth. And I nearly fainted, and the receptionist just laughed at me.
It's a good job you didn't. They'd have charged you £2,000 to resuscitate you. That's extra. 12 just for, a fancy word for brushing your teeth, your dog's teeth.
I mean, they have to put them under, obviously.
I see. Okay.
And then a few days later, he was getting diarrhea. It's sort of like a reaction, and So I was getting a bit worried. I went in and I had a 10-minute consultation with the vet. That was £70. Then they gave me this tube of paste, which I needed immediately. That helps sort of line their stomach. Yep. £47.
That's quite cheap.
Online, £18.
There it is, you see. So that's a 200% markup straight away.
I don't know. honestly, because it's obviously corporates that are controlling these.
And they're just going to charge what they can. It's like everything else. I'm blue in the face saying this. They just turn it up, because they're not in it for anything other than money. It's why venture capital shouldn't be allowed anywhere near things like water companies or electricity companies, and now vets, of course.
Yeah, they're holding us to ransom, like that lady said.
It's worse than that. They're leveraging your love for your dog.
Yeah, it's all wrong, and I don't know how they do it. And look at me when I paid £47 for that tube, and I mean when I get his other medication like flea and worming online, which is a quarter what I would have to pay at the vet.
They are having a laugh. Absolutely ridiculous, having a bubble. Thank you, Robert, and good luck. And it's so nice that you care so much about your animal, but how awful for people to, because there'll be somebody somewhere, lots of people somewhere, shareholders, rubbing their hands with glee. Oh, here comes another one. Loves his dog. Oh, here comes another one. She loves her cat. She loves her hamster. She loves her guinea pig. You know what that means, don't you? That means money. Hey, 12:47 is the time. I've got another very important story for you next, involving the situation in Gaza, and also one of the full disclosures. I know you've noticed this in the past, but sometimes I get a guest on Full Disclosure who brings out my inner 10-year-old in a way that is impossible to disguise. It doesn't have to be someone who was around when I was 10. It's just someone in a world that has been appealing to me profoundly since I was a child, since I was a boy. And this week's Full Disclosure guest is the second cricketing icon that I've had on the series, and but considerably younger than the last one, and an absolute joy to talk to. It's a very special interview. Cricketing icon. Can you guess who it is?
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:51, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You will remember, I think, that we've had a couple of guests from Project Pure Hope on the programme before. It is an initiative which seeks to medically evacuate children for life-saving treatment from Gaza, in this case. And it was an interview when two of my next guests' colleagues at the project were in the studio that revealed something I thought horrible, actually. I've never... Because I couldn't work out initially why they were at such pains to tell me that this was all privately funded. And the answer was that as soon as it got reported that the first two children who had successfully negotiated the myriad obstacles put in place in large part by the UK government, and of course also by the Israeli government, to actually come here and have incredibly important medical treatment, the troll culture that we now inhabit jumped upon this incredibly uplifting and beautiful story, and because the children are Palestinian, attacked, even though it wasn't going to cost them a penny. And so, unfortunately, the nature of the interview was defined by the hatred that helping poorly children in one of the world's most hideous war zones had engendered from the kind of character that so many politicians seem to be wooing today. Raza Halim is a barrister and co-founder of the initiative of Project Pure Hope, and he joins me now to tell me about the latest children that the project is trying to get into this country for treatment. Tell me first, if you would, Raza, thank you for joining me, about Hatem and Karam. What situation are they currently in?
I mean, their situation is dire, and there's just no other way to describe it. Hatem is a 3-year-old boy who's now been orphaned as a result of an explosion at his home. He's got 4th-degree burns. He cries for his mum and dad every day and can't understand why they can't come to him. And the long and short of it is that without a medical evacuation, he's not going to make it. And he's got burns all over his body, his face. And it's important to make the point that he's not only he's not only facing possible death or near certain death if he's not evacuated, but while he waits, he's enduring pain. I mean, he's got burns on his body, his face, his eyelids are burned. And I don't know if anyone can imagine what it's like to have your eyelids burned. But and also remember, the hospitals don't have painkillers. They're rationing painkillers because of the blockade. So that's where he is, waiting, we hope, for an evacuation. And then you've got 1-year-old Karam, who is suffering from Hirschsprung's disease, which is something that is eminently operable, but without an operation, he will also lose his life. He is also enduring pain that his mum can't explain to him. She's got to endure. And one can only imagine, and I'm sure many of your audience will know themselves, the heartbreak of seeing your child enduring any kind of pain and not being able to do something about it is almost intolerable.
I know Hatem is being treated by Victoria Rose, who has been a guest on this radio station, not just this programme, on quite a few occasions. She's absolutely adamant that he needs to be evacuated as soon as is humanly possible. What are the problems? Why can't he be? Why hasn't he already been?
Well, we've heard from the Foreign Secretary yesterday that if there's more that we can do, or that the government can do, that they will of course seek to do it. Now, we welcome that indication, and we are working in partnership with the government, and we're hopeful for a positive decision. But what's absolutely critical here is speed, because if they aren't evacuated in time, they will die. And what we need is clearance from the UK government to accept these children. We've shown that we can, at Project Pure Hope, we can do this, and that we will do it again. All the logistics, and importantly, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to make this point again, all the expenses will be met by us. Not a single taxpayer penny will be spent on this. And of course, and that's because of the generosity of the British people. Ordinary people reaching into their pocket. And the second point is that not a single NHS bed will be used. So that's another point that I've got to make clear, because it's another thing that's come up. These children will be supported in the private wings of UK hospitals, the kind that people from all around the world come to use, paying their way. The third myth, or the third question that comes up is, well, they can be treated regionally. We look to treat children regionally when they can be. But where those countries don't have the equipment, the capacity, or the expertise, that's when we look to evacuate them to the UK. And we should be proud of the exceptionally high standard of care that we're able to provide because of our world-leading expertise in the UK.
Do you know, I thought you might have been overreacting there, but as you spoke, someone called Isaac texted me to say, why can't they go to Egypt?
Yeah.
But then I look at his texting history and he doesn't believe that there's any hunger in Gaza at the moment either. So I guess we can see where he's coming from. So you have to shoot these foxes. You have to explode these myths, even as you're in the business of trying to get two children who can't really be treated anywhere else in the world to the kind of medical facilities where their lives can literally be saved at the expense of altruistic, decent British citizens who've made donations. Raza, thank you. How can people find out more about Project Pure Hope and indeed support the work that you're doing?
If listeners could go to projectpurehope.co.uk, you'll find whatever information you'd like to find out about us, and there's a donations link, 100% of which goes to these children. None of us are taking a penny. We're not doing this for anything other than out of a spirit of wanting to do something, anything for these children. And we just implore people to read about us and for the government to act with...
And, David Lammy, to give permission to you to bring the children here, really, is what you need next.
Give us permission. Do it with speed. We will do the rest.
Raza Halim, thank you. We will do it all, in other words. Man. Completely different note and altogether more cheerful now. I got to sit down with one of my heroes for an hour. I don't often wax lyrical about cricket on this programme, but there are moments where it can be an almost transcendental pleasure, and few players in England, sweater in recent years, have brought more joy to cricket fans than Jimmy Anderson. When you first arrived at Lancashire and John Stanworth was the coach at the academy, he said... This is what he said about you. He said, absolutely zip all to me for the first 2.5 years. He was quiet, unassuming and quite shy. You're not anymore, are you?
Yeah.
You think you are?
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah.
So on the pitch, you become somebody that you are never off the pitch?
Yes, definitely. But that was what, the sports psychologists that I work with, that's what we were sort of working on. If I'm too nice on the field, if I was too nice on the field, I wouldn't bowl well. So he was trying to bring out a different side of me, and there was a different side of me, but it would just get angry and frustrated with more often than not with myself because I'm not playing well. So I'd just get more and more tense and try and bowl faster and faster. So it was trying to control that, but bring it down to a level where I wasn't too nice. It was somewhere in the middle.
And you actually use numbers to track this, I think, with 7 being the optimum.
7's the optimum, yeah.
So that means I'm passionate, but not angry.
I'm in control.
I'm in control. Can you feel it when it settles on you?
Yeah, I'd say a 7 for me. If I think back, I am like completely focused. It's like the point where you can't, if you're playing cricket with 30,000 people watching, I can't hear a thing. I'm just so I've got tunnel vision. I'm just thinking about what I'm doing in that moment.
Jimmy Anderson there on this week's Full Disclosure. And I mean, it's a lovely thing if you're a fan of humans, not just of cricket. You're going to have to trust me on that one. Delighted to tell you that Lewis Goodall is standing in for me all next week while I enjoy a richly deserved holiday. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on, catch up on both Global Player and the brand new LBC app, where you can, of course, stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion, put your news categories in the order that you want, as well as pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts, including, of course, Full Disclosure. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Ben Kentish in for Tom Swarbrick at 4, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.